The Atlanta sun hung heavy in the late afternoon sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of the West Side neighborhood. Officer Sarah Collins adjusted her tactical vest as she walked alongside her partner Max, a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois whose alert eyes scanned every corner, every alley, every potential threat with the precision of a trained sentinel. The weight of her duty belt felt familiar against her hips. Glock 22, radio, handcuffs, pepper spray, all tools of a trade she'd mastered over the past decade. Max's paws clicked rhythmically against the concrete as they turned onto Murphy Avenue, a street lined with aging apartment complexes and chain-link fences that had seen better days. Sarah's hand rested lightly on Max's tactical harness, feeling the subtle tension in his body that told her he was reading the environment just as carefully as she was. "Unit 47 to dispatch," Sarah spoke into her shoulder radio, her voice steady and professional. "Continuing patrol on Murphy Avenue, all quiet so far." The radio crackled back with a confirmation, and Sarah allowed herself a moment to appreciate the relative peace of the shift. It had been a long week. 3 domestic disturbances, 2 drug busts, and 1 high-speed chase that had ended with Max tracking a suspect through Piedmont Park in the dark. Her body still ached from that particular adventure. Max suddenly stopped, his ears perking forward. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her sidearm as she followed his gaze down the street. At first she saw nothing unusual. Just the typical afternoon scene of a working-class neighborhood winding down from the day. But Max never reacted without reason. Then she heard it, a sound that cut through the ambient noise of traffic and distant sirens like a knife through silk. A child's cry, high-pitched and desperate, growing louder with each passing second. Sarah's training kicked in immediately, her green eyes locked onto a small figure running toward them, arms pumping frantically, dark hair streaming behind her. The girl couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, wearing a pink t-shirt and jeans that were too big for her small frame. "Officer! Officer, please!" The child's voice broke with sobs as she ran, nearly stumbling over her own feet in her haste. Sarah immediately dropped to one knee, positioning herself at the child's eye level while keeping Max close but non-threatening. The dog remained alert but calm, his training evident in the way he assessed the situation without adding to the child's fear. Hey, it's okay. I'm here now," Sarah said, her voice shifting from cop to caregiver in an instant. She gently caught the girl's shoulders as she reached them, steadying her trembling body. "Take a deep breath for me, sweetheart. What's your name?" The girl's face was streaked with tears, her brown eyes wide with terror. "Emma," she gasped between sobs. "My name is Emma. Please, you have to help my mom. They're hurting her." Sarah's stomach tightened. The raw fear in the child's voice was genuine, and years of experience had taught her to trust that instinct. "Who's hurting your mom, Emma? Where is she?" "At home. They won't let her leave. There are men and they're yelling, and I heard her screaming," and Emma's words tumbled over each other in a panicked rush. Okay. You did the right thing by finding me," Sarah assured her, already keying her radio with one hand while keeping the other on Emma's shoulder. "How far is home from here?" "Just down there." Emma pointed toward a 3-story apartment complex about 2 blocks away, its faded brick exterior and rusted fire escapes marking it as one of the older buildings in the area. Sarah spoke quickly into her radio. "Unit 47 to dispatch. I have a possible domestic violence situation in progress at..." She looked at Emma. "What's your address, honey?" 2847 Murphy Avenue, apartment 3B. 2847 Murphy Avenue, apartment 3B. Child witness reports her mother is being held against her will by multiple suspects, requesting immediate backup. The dispatcher's response came back crisp and efficient. "Copy, Unit 47. Backup is en route. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Sarah's jaw tightened. In a situation like this, 8 minutes could be an eternity. She looked down at Emma's terrified face, then at Max, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand the gravity of every situation they encountered together. "Emma, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw before you ran," How many men are there? 3, I think. Maybe more. I don't know. I was hiding in my room when I heard them come in. They were talking to my mom, and then they started yelling, and she told me to run, so I did. I climbed out my window and ran until I found you." Sarah's mind raced through the tactical considerations. Multiple suspects, unknown weapon status, a victim who might be injured, and backup still minutes away. Every second that passed increased the risk to Emma's mother. But rushing in blind with a child in tow could make everything worse. "Emma, listen to me very carefully. I'm going to help your mom, but I need you to be brave for me, okay? Max and I are going to check on her, but I need you to stay outside where it's safe." "No, I want to go with you." Emma grabbed Sarah's vest, her small fingers clutching the tactical fabric. Sarah gently but firmly removed the girl's hands. "I know you're scared, and that's okay. But the best way you can help your mom right now is by doing exactly what I tell you. Do you see that convenience store across the street?" She pointed to a small shop with a bright red awning. "I need you to go inside and tell the person at the counter that you're with Officer Collins. You stay there until I come get you or another police officer comes. Can you do that for me?" Emma's lip trembled, but she nodded. Sarah pulled out her card and pressed it into the girl's hand. "You show them this, okay? Don't come back outside until we come for you. Promise me." "I promise," Emma whispered. "Good girl. Now go, quickly." Sarah watched as Emma ran toward the store, waiting until she saw the child disappear inside before turning her full attention to the apartment complex looming ahead. She unclipped Max's leash from his harness, switching him to working mode with a subtle hand signal he knew well. "Max, heel," she commanded softly, and the dog immediately moved into position at her left side, every muscle coiled and ready. They approached the building with tactical precision, Sarah's hand resting on her holstered weapon. The apartment complex was typical of the area, underfunded, under-maintained, but home to hard-working families trying to make ends meet. A rusted swing set sat in the small courtyard, and broken glass glittered in the grass near the entrance. The front door to the building stood propped open, the lock mechanism clearly broken. Sarah made a mental note as she entered the dim hallway, the smell of old cooking grease and mildew hitting her nostrils. The stairs creaked under their weight as they climbed to the 3rd floor, Max moving silently beside her despite his 70-pound frame. Apartment 3B was halfway down the corridor. Sarah could hear muffled voices through the door, though she couldn't make out the words. She positioned herself to the side of the doorframe. Never stand directly in front of a door in a potential hostile situation, and signaled Max to stay alert. She knocked firmly. "Atlanta Police Department. Open the door." The voices inside stopped abruptly. Sarah's hand moved to her weapon, thumb releasing the retention strap. Seconds ticked by, heavy with tension. "I said open the door. We received a call about a disturbance at this address." More silence. Then the sound of rapid footsteps inside, something crashing and a woman's muffled scream. That was all Sarah needed. "Max! Guard!" she commanded, and the dog's demeanor shifted instantly from alert to aggressive, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Sarah tried the door handle, locked. Without hesitation, she stepped back and delivered a powerful kick just beside the lock mechanism. The old door frame splintered and the door flew open. The scene inside was chaos. The small apartment was in disarray, furniture overturned, belongings scattered across the floor. A woman in her early 30s was pressed against the far wall, her face bruised and swollen, held there by a large man with his hand around her throat. 2 other men stood in the room, one near a window that led to the fire escape, the other blocking the hallway to what Sarah assumed were the bedrooms. "Atlanta PD, hands where I can see them. Now!" Sarah's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of someone who had been in these situations before. The man holding the woman released her immediately, all 3 suspects raising their hands, but their eyes were calculating, measuring. Sarah recognized that look. These weren't panicked amateurs caught in a domestic dispute. These were professionals, and that realization sent a chill down her spine. "On the ground, all of you, hands behind your heads." The woman, Emma's mother, Sarah assumed, collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. Her eyes met Sarah's, filled with a desperate gratitude mixed with terror. "You don't understand what you're walking into, officer," the largest man said, his voice carrying a hint of an accent Sarah couldn't quite place. "This doesn't concern you. 3 men, 1 woman who appears to be assaulted, and I have a terrified child who ran for help. It very much concerns me. I said on the ground." Sarah kept her weapon trained on the men while Max moved forward, his growl intensifying. The man near the window shifted his weight, and Max's head snapped toward him, teeth bared. The message was clear. Try to run, and you'll have to deal with 70 pounds of highly trained Belgian Malinois before you make it 2 feet. "We're going." "You can have her," the largest man said. But something about his tone set off every alarm bell in Sarah's head. This was too easy. Men like this didn't just walk away from a confrontation with a single police officer, even one with a K9 partner. "Nobody's going anywhere until backup arrives. All 3 of you, face down on the floor, hands behind your heads. You have 3 seconds to comply." For a moment the standoff held, tension crackling through the stale air of the apartment. Then, with coordinated precision that confirmed Sarah's suspicion about their professionalism, all 3 men dropped to the floor simultaneously. Sarah moved quickly, keeping her weapon trained while using her radio. "Unit 47 to dispatch. I'm on scene at 3B. 3 male suspects in custody, 1 female victim. Situation under control, but I need that backup now." "Copy, Unit 47. Units are pulling up now." As if on cue, Sarah heard footsteps thundering up the stairs, and within moments 3 uniformed officers burst into the apartment, weapons drawn. "We've got them, Collins," Officer Martinez said, moving in to handcuff the suspects while his partner secured the scene. Sarah holstered her weapon and immediately went to Emma's mother, who was still on her knees, trembling. "Mom, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" The woman looked up at her with eyes that held a complexity of emotions Sarah had seen before in victims: relief, fear, gratitude, and something else, something that looked like resignation. "I'm okay," she whispered, though the bruises on her face told a different story. "Is Emma safe? Please tell me my baby is safe." "She's safe. She's the bravest little girl I've ever met." "She's the one who brought me here," Sarah assured her, helping the woman to her feet. "I'm Officer Sarah Collins. What's your name?" "Maria. Maria Vasquez." The woman's voice cracked. "Thank you. Thank you for coming." As the other officers hauled the 3 men to their feet and began reading them their rights, Sarah studied them more carefully. Their clothing was too nice for this neighborhood. Designer jeans, expensive watches, leather jackets that probably cost more than Maria's monthly rent. These weren't local thugs. "Paramedics are on the way," Officer Rodriguez reported, appearing in the doorway. "We've got a crowd gathering downstairs. Word travels fast around here." Sarah nodded, her attention still on Maria and the 3 suspects being led out in handcuffs. Max had returned to her side, his work mode deactivating now that the immediate threat was neutralized, though his eyes remained watchful. "Maria, I need to ask you some questions about what happened here," Sarah began gently. "But first, let's get you checked out by the paramedics, okay?" Maria nodded, but as Sarah began to guide her toward the door, the woman's hand suddenly gripped her arm with surprising strength. "Officer Collins," she whispered urgently, glancing toward where the suspects had been led away. "You need to understand something. This isn't over. Those men, they're not just—" "Ma'am, everything's going to be fine now. They're going into custody, and—" "No." Maria's intensity cut through Sarah's reassurance. "You don't understand. They're part of something bigger, much bigger. And if they were here, if they found me—" Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Others are in danger. So many others." Sarah's instincts, honed by years of police work, fired on all cylinders. "What do you mean? What others?" Before Maria could answer, Officer Martinez called from the doorway. "Collins, one of the suspects is asking for his lawyer. Says we have no grounds to hold him, that this was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Sarah's voice hardened. "I have a child witness and a victim with visible injuries. We have plenty of grounds." But as she looked back at Maria, she saw something in the woman's eyes that troubled her deeply. It wasn't just fear. It was the look of someone who knew far more than she was saying. Someone caught in something that didn't end with 3 arrests. The paramedics arrived, and Sarah stepped back to let them assess Maria's injuries. As they worked, she surveyed the apartment more carefully. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, details began to emerge that didn't fit a simple home invasion or domestic assault. The apartment was sparse but clean. There were signs of a child's presence. Emma's drawings taped to the refrigerator, a small backpack by the door, children's books on a shelf, but there was also something else. On the kitchen table, partially hidden under some scattered papers, Sarah spotted a cell phone. Not Maria's. That was clutched in the woman's hand. This was different. A burner phone, the kind used by people who didn't want their communications traced. Sarah pulled on a latex glove from her belt and carefully picked up the phone, pressing the power button. The screen lit up, showing several text messages in Spanish. Sarah's Spanish was decent, good enough to recognize words like entrega, delivery, mercancía, merchandise, and ubicación, location. "Hey, Collins, we're going to transport the suspects to the precinct," Martinez called out. "You want to ride with us or follow?" "I'll follow. I need to reunite a little girl with her mother first," Sarah replied, slipping the phone into an evidence bag she pulled from her tactical vest. As the paramedics finished their initial assessment of Maria, concluding that her injuries, while painful, weren't life-threatening, Sarah crouched down to where Max sat patiently. She ran her hand through his fur, a gesture that served both to praise him and to ground herself. "Good boy, Max. Good boy," she murmured. The dog's tail wagged once, his version of a modest acceptance of the compliment. Something wasn't right here. The pieces didn't fit together the way they should. 3 well-dressed men targeting a single mother in a rundown apartment. Maria's cryptic warning about others in danger. The burner phone with what looked like coded messages. Sarah's years of experience told her what her instincts already knew. She hadn't just stumbled onto a random assault. She'd stumbled onto something much bigger, much darker. And that terrified 7-year-old girl who'd run to her for help had inadvertently opened a door that led somewhere Sarah suspected neither of them were prepared to go. As she prepared to head back downstairs to retrieve Emma from the convenience store, Maria called out weakly from where the paramedics were bandaging her wrist. "Officer Collins, please, be careful. They have eyes everywhere, and they don't forget." Sarah met her eyes across the chaotic apartment, seeing in them a warning that went beyond simple gratitude or fear. This was the look of someone who had seen the true face of evil, and who knew that face was still out there, watching. "I'll be careful," Sarah promised, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was promising to be careful of yet. She and Max descended the stairs, the weight of the afternoon's events settling over her shoulders like a heavy mantle. Outside, the setting sun painted the Atlanta skyline in shades of orange and red, beautiful and indifferent to the dramas playing out in its shadow. At the convenience store, Emma sat on a plastic chair behind the counter, her small legs swinging nervously, the clerk standing protectively nearby. The moment she saw Sarah walk through the door, the girl leaped up and ran to her. "Is my mum okay? Please tell me she's okay." Sarah knelt down, and this time she pulled Emma into a gentle hug. "Your mom is going to be fine. You saved her life today, Emma. You were so brave." Emma buried her face in Sarah's shoulder, her small body shaking with relieved sobs. Max moved closer, gently pressing his head against the child, offering the comfort that dogs seemed to instinctively know how to provide. "Can I see her now?" Emma asked, pulling back to look at Sarah with red-rimmed but hopeful eyes. "In just a few minutes. The paramedics are making sure she's okay, and then we'll take you to her, I promise." As Sarah straightened up, thanking the store clerk for watching over Emma, her radio crackled to life. "All units be advised, suspects from the Murphy Avenue incident are being transported to central booking. However, we've got a complication. One of the suspects has diplomatic credentials. State Department has been notified." Sarah's blood ran cold. Diplomatic credentials. That explained the expensive clothes, the professional coordination, and the man's confidence that this didn't concern her. What had Emma and her mother gotten caught up in? And more importantly, what had Sarah just walked into? She took Emma's hand, Max falling into step beside them as they walked back toward the apartment building where an ambulance now sat, its lights painting the gathering dusk in alternating flashes of red and blue. The crowd that had gathered parted to let them through, faces curious and concerned in equal measure. Maria was being loaded into the ambulance when they arrived. The moment she saw Emma, tears streamed down her face. Mi amor, mi pequeña. Emma broke free from Sarah's hand and ran to the ambulance, the paramedics allowing her to climb in beside her mother. Sarah watched as mother and daughter embraced, Maria pressing kisses to Emma's hair, while the little girl clung to her, both of them crying. "We're taking them to Grady Memorial," one of the paramedics informed Sarah. "You'll want to get a full statement from her there." "I will," Sarah confirmed, but her mind was already racing ahead, piecing together implications and potential connections. Officer Martinez appeared at her side. "Hell of a first response, Collins. That could have gone sideways fast. Something's not right about this, Martinez. Those men, the diplomatic credentials, the way Maria was talking. This wasn't just a random assault." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "You thinking human trafficking, drugs? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Sarah pulled out the evidence bag containing the burner phone. "I found this in the apartment. I need to get it to forensics, see what they can pull from it. Captain's going to want a full report on this one, especially with the diplomatic angle." Martinez shook his head. "Politics and police work, always a messy combination." As the ambulance pulled away, Emma's small face visible in the back window, one hand pressed against the glass in a gesture that might have been a wave or simply a need to maintain that fragile connection, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle more heavily on her shoulders. She looked down at Max, who gazed back at her with those knowing eyes. "Come on, partner. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." The sun had fully set now, and Atlanta's evening lights were beginning to flicker to life across the city. Somewhere out there, in this vast urban landscape, were the answers to the questions that were beginning to pile up in Sarah's mind. Who were those men, really? What was Maria's connection to them? And what did she mean when she said others are in danger? Sarah climbed into her K9 unit, Max jumping into his secured area in the back. As she started the engine and pulled away from Murphy Avenue, she couldn't shake the image of Emma's terrified face, the desperate sound of that child's voice crying out for help. "They're hurting my mom." Those 4 words had set something in motion that Sarah suspected would take her places she never anticipated. But that was the job. That was what she'd signed up for when she pinned that badge to her chest. To protect and serve. To stand between the innocent and those who would do them harm. Whatever this was, whatever dark web she'd just pulled at the edges of, Sarah Collins and Max would see it through to the end. Because somewhere in this city, if Maria's warnings were to be believed, other people were in danger. Other Emmas were waiting for someone to hear their cries for help. And Sarah Collins had never been good at walking away from people who needed help. The city lights blurred past her windows as she drove toward the precinct, the burner phone in its evidence bag sitting on the passenger seat, like a silent promise of answers to come. Behind her, Max settled into his secure compartment, trusting as always that wherever Sarah led, whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. The partnership between human and dog, between officer and K9, was built on trust, training, and an unspoken bond that transcended words. As Sarah navigated the evening traffic, her mind already working through the angles and implications of what she'd witnessed, she drew strength from that bond. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more complications, more pieces to a puzzle she was only beginning to see. But tonight, at least, Emma and Maria were safe. Tonight, a little girl who'd been brave enough to run for help could sleep knowing her mother was alive because she'd found the courage to ask for it. And that, Sarah reflected, was why she did this job, for moments like that, for the difference that one officer, one K9, one decisive action could make in someone's life. The fluorescent lights of the Atlanta Police Department's Central Precinct hummed with their familiar buzz as Sarah Collins sat at her desk, the burner phone from Maria's apartment sealed in an evidence bag before her. It was nearly midnight, but sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. Max lay curled at her feet, his breathing steady and calm, but she knew from the occasional twitch of his ears that he was monitoring the environment, even in rest. The bullpen was mostly empty at this hour, just a few officers working late shifts, their voices a low murmur against the backdrop of ringing phones and clicking keyboards. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes and pulled up the incident report on her computer screen for the third time, reading through the details as if something new might reveal itself. The three suspects, identified as Victor Kozlov, Marcus Chen, and Diego Ramirez, had been processed and were currently sitting in holding cells awaiting arraignment. Kozlov, the largest of the three, was the one with diplomatic credentials. According to the State Department liaison, who'd shown up within an hour of the arrest, Kozlov claimed to be a cultural attaché with the Russian consulate. His credentials were legitimate, which meant the entire situation had become exponentially more complicated. Sarah's captain, James Morrison, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with graying temples and sharp blue eyes, had pulled her aside earlier that evening. His warning had been clear, but delivered with the respect he'd always shown his officers. "Collins, I need you to be careful with this one. The diplomatic angle means we're walking on eggshells. The State Department is already breathing down our necks, and we've got less than 48 hours to either charge them or let them walk. We need solid evidence, not just the word of a victim who might be too scared to testify. Captain, you saw Maria Vasquez's face. Those bruises weren't self-inflicted, and her daughter—" "I know, Sarah, I know." Morrison had held up a hand. "I'm not saying we drop this. I'm saying we need to build an airtight case, and we need to do it fast. The clock is ticking." Now, alone at her desk with the weight of that deadline pressing down on her, Sarah opened the forensics report on the burner phone. The tech team had worked fast, pulling data from the device with impressive efficiency. What they'd found had only deepened the mystery. The phone contained dozens of text messages, all in Spanish, all using coded language that forensics had begun to decode. Words like paquetes, packages, and entrega, delivery, appeared frequently, along with addresses scattered throughout Atlanta and neighboring counties. But what had caught Sarah's attention and sent a chill down her spine were the photos, dozens of photos of women, young women, mostly in their 20s and 30s, photographed against plain backgrounds with expressions that ranged from frightened to carefully blank. Each photo was labeled with a number, nothing more, not names, just numbers. Sarah had seen enough in her career to recognize what she was looking at. This wasn't just assault. This wasn't just intimidation. This was human trafficking, and Maria Vasquez had somehow become entangled in it. She pulled out her notepad and began making connections, drawing lines between the addresses in the text messages and the locations on a map of Atlanta she'd pulled up on her second monitor. A pattern began to emerge. Warehouse districts, run-down apartment complexes in economically depressed areas, a few commercial properties that appeared abandoned. Burning the midnight oil, Collins? Sarah looked up to find Detective James Rodriguez standing by her desk, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He was a veteran investigator, late 40s, with a reputation for solving cases that other detectives had written off as dead ends. He offered her one of the cups, and she accepted it gratefully. "Can't sleep," she admitted. "This case has too many loose ends." Rodriguez pulled up a chair and sat down, his dark eyes scanning the evidence spread across her desk. "The Murphy Avenue incident. I heard about the diplomatic complications. That's a headache you don't need." "It's bigger than a diplomatic incident, Rodriguez. Look at this." Sarah turned her monitor so he could see the decoded messages and the photos. "These women, they're victims. Maria Vasquez is just one piece of a much larger operation." Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression growing grave as he studied the evidence. "Human trafficking? That's my working theory. The coded messages, The numbered photos, the multiple locations, it all fits the pattern. And if I'm right, we're looking at a network that's been operating under our noses for who knows how long. Have you talked to the victim? Does she know about the scope of this? Sarah shook her head. Not yet. She's at Grady Memorial with her daughter. I'm planning to interview her first thing in the morning. But Rodriguez, she said something before the paramedics took her away. She said others are in danger, that these men are part of something bigger. Rodriguez whistled low. And one of them has diplomatic immunity. That means connections, protection, resources. Collins, if you're going to pursue this, you need to be smart about it. These kinds of operations don't run without serious muscle behind them. I know, but I can't just let it go. That little girl, Emma, she ran to me for help. I can't turn my back on this now. I'm not suggesting you should. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. But you're going to need more than a burner phone and a victim statement. You need to connect these dots in a way that even the State Department can't ignore. You need to find the other victims, document the network, and build a case so solid that diplomatic credentials won't matter. Sarah felt a surge of determination. Then that's what I'll do. Rodriguez smiled slightly. I thought you might say that, which is why I'm offering to help. This kind of case requires more than just a K9 officer. No offense to you or Max. He nodded toward the dog, who had lifted his head at the mention of his name. You need investigative resources, contacts, and someone who knows how to navigate the political minefield you're about to walk into. You do that? Collins, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen a lot of bad things, but human trafficking, that's the kind of evil that keeps me up at night. If there's a chance to take down an operation like this, I'm in. Sarah felt a weight lift slightly from her shoulders. Having Rodriguez's experience and connections could make all the difference. Thank you, really. Don't thank me yet. We've got our work cut out for us. Rodriguez pulled out his own notepad. Let's start with what we know and work our way out. The 3 suspects. What's their story? Sarah pulled up their arrest records on her computer. Viktor Kozlov, 42, Russian national with diplomatic credentials. Claims he was visiting Maria Vasquez to discuss cultural exchange programs, which is obviously garbage. No prior arrests in the US, but when I ran his name through Interpol, some interesting flags came up. Nothing concrete, but there are notes from agencies in Eastern Europe suggesting possible connections to organized crime. Organized crime with diplomatic cover. Classic, Rodriguez muttered. Next, Marcus Chen, 35, naturalized U.S. citizen originally from Hong Kong. He owns several businesses in Atlanta, a restaurant, a laundromat, and a shipping company. On paper, he's a successful entrepreneur, but his shipping company has been flagged twice in the past year for customs irregularities, nothing that led to charges, but enough to raise eyebrows. A shipping company, that's a convenient way to move people across borders, Rodriguez observed. And the third, Diego Ramirez, 38, Colombian national with a green card, works as a manager at one of Chen's businesses, the restaurant. He has one prior arrest for assault, but the charges were dropped when the victim recanted their statement. Rodriguez's expression darkened. Let me guess. The victim was scared into silence. That would be my assumption. The pattern fits. Sarah pulled up another screen. But here's what's really interesting. I did some digging into the properties listed in those text messages. 3 of them. A warehouse in the industrial district, an apartment complex in Bankhead, and a commercial building near the airport. They're all owned by shell companies. And when I trace those shell companies, they all connect back to a holding company called Apex International Ventures. Let me guess, Chen's shipping company does business with Apex. Bingo! And Kozlov's name appears on the board of directors for one of Apex's subsidiaries. Sarah met Rodriguez's eyes. They're connected, all of them. This isn't just 3 guys acting independently. This is an organized operation with international reach. Rodriguez let out a low whistle. You've been busy. How long have you been working on this? Sarah glanced at her watch. About 6 hours. Collins, you're either going to make detective before you're 40, or you're going to burn out before you're 35. I can't decide which." But there was admiration in his voice. "Okay, so we've got the framework of an organization. Now we need to prove they're using this infrastructure for trafficking. That means finding the victims, documenting their stories, and building a paper trail that leads back to these men." "I'm going to start with Maria," Sarah said. "If she was targeted by them, there's a reason. She knows something, or she's seen something. I just need to get her to trust me enough to share it. That might be harder than you think. Trafficking victims are often terrified of law enforcement, especially if they're undocumented or if the traffickers have threatened their families. You'll need to approach this carefully." Sarah thought of Emma's terrified face, of the way Maria had clutched her daughter in the ambulance. "She trusted me enough to let me help her today. I have to believe she'll trust me with the rest." "I hope you're right." Rodriguez stood, draining the last of his coffee. "I'll start pulling files on those properties tomorrow, see if we can establish surveillance on the locations. If there are victims being held at any of these sites, we need to identify them and figure out the best way to get them out safely." "What about the suspects? Are we going to be able to hold them?" "For now, yes. But like Morrison said, we've got 48 hours max before the State Department forces our hand on Kozlov. The other two we might be able to keep longer, but their lawyers are already making noise about wrongful arrest and lack of evidence." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We'll get the evidence. We have to." After Rodriguez left, Sarah spent another hour combing through the data, making notes, building timelines. Max had fallen back asleep, his steady breathing a comforting constant in the quiet office. Around 2 in the morning, exhaustion finally began to overtake adrenaline, and Sarah knew she needed rest if she was going to be sharp for tomorrow's interview with Maria. She gathered her things, roused Max with a gentle touch, and headed out to her vehicle. The precinct parking lot was nearly empty, lit by harsh yellow security lights that cast long shadows across the pavement. As Sarah opened the back door for Max to jump in, she had the distinct sensation of being watched. She turned, her hand instinctively moving toward her weapon, but saw nothing except empty cars and the distant glow of the city. Still, the feeling persisted, a prickle at the back of her neck that years of police work had taught her not to ignore. "Come on, Max, let's get home," she murmured, scanning the lot once more before climbing into the driver's seat. The drive to her apartment in Virginia Highland took 20 minutes at this time of night, the streets mostly empty except for the occasional taxi or late-night reveler stumbling home from the bars. Sarah's mind continued to work the case even as she navigated the familiar route, turning over the pieces of the puzzle, looking for patterns and connections. Her apartment was a modest one-bedroom on the second floor of a converted Victorian house. It was small but comfortable, filled with the practical furnishings of someone who spent more time working than decorating. The only real personal touches were the photos on her bookshelf, her graduation from the police academy, her first day with Max, a picture of her parents from before her father's death 5 years ago. Max headed straight for his water bowl while Sarah locked the door behind them, engaging both the deadbolt and the chain lock. The feeling of being watched hadn't left her, and she found herself checking the windows, pulling the curtains closed, double-checking the locks. "You're being paranoid," she told herself, but she couldn't quite shake the unease. She changed into comfortable clothes and collapsed onto her bed, intending to sleep for just a few hours before heading back to work. But her phone buzzed with a text message before she could even close her eyes. Unknown number. "You should be more careful about the cases you choose to pursue, Officer Collins. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed." Sarah sat bolt upright, her heart hammering. She immediately called the precinct, reporting the threatening message to the duty officer who promised to trace the number. But Sarah already knew what they'd find. A burner phone, probably already destroyed, untraceable. Someone was watching her. Someone knew what she was investigating, and they wanted her to know they were watching. Sarah got out of bed and retrieved her service weapon from the lockbox on her nightstand, checking the magazine and chamber before setting it on the bedside table within easy reach. Max, sensing her tension, came to sit beside the bed, his dark eyes alert and watchful. "It's okay, boy," Sarah said softly, running her hand over his head. "We're okay." But as she lay back down, sleep now impossible despite her exhaustion, Sarah knew that things were far from okay. She'd struck a nerve with her investigation, rattled someone who had the resources and the boldness to threaten a police officer directly. Instead of frightening her off, though, the message only strengthened her resolve. Someone out there was scared enough to try to intimidate her, which meant she was on the right track, which meant there really was a trafficking network operating in Atlanta, and it was bigger and more dangerous than she'd initially thought. Maria's warning echoed in her mind. They have eyes everywhere, and they don't forget. Sarah stared at the ceiling, her mind racing through scenarios and countermeasures. She would need to be more careful, more vigilant. She would need to watch her back and Max's. But she wouldn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not when women like Maria were being victimized, not when children like Emma were living in fear. The night stretched on, sleep coming in fitful bursts between moments of hypervigilance. Every car that passed outside, every creak of the old house settling, sent Sarah's hand reaching for her weapon. Max remained on guard beside her bed, a loyal sentinel who seemed to understand that tonight the danger was more than just theoretical. As dawn finally began to break over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sarah rose and prepared for the day ahead. She showered, dressed in a fresh uniform, and made sure her equipment was in order. Max ate his breakfast and received his usual morning praise and affection, the routine helping to ground them both. At 7:30, Sarah's phone rang. It was Rodriguez. "Collins, we've got a problem." Maria Vasquez checked herself out of the hospital last night against medical advice. She took her daughter and left. The hospital has no record of where they went. Sarah's blood ran cold. "What? When?" "Around 3 a.m. The nurse on duty said Maria was agitated, kept saying she needed to leave, that it wasn't safe. Security footage shows her and the girl getting into a taxi, but we lost the trail after that." Sarah grabbed her keys, Max already at the door, sensing the urgency. They got to her. Somehow they got to her and scared her enough to run. "That's my read too. Collins, I hate to say this, but without Maria's testimony, our case against the suspects just got a lot weaker. Her disappearance is going to make her look unreliable at best, complicit at worst." "She's not complicit, Rodriguez. She's terrified, and she has every right to be." Sarah's mind raced. "We need to find her before they do. If they threatened her last night, if they know where she is, I've already got units checking her apartment and known associates. But Collins, if she doesn't want to be found, if she's really running, it's going to be like finding a needle in a haystack." Sarah thought of Emma's small hand in hers, of the trust in those young eyes when she'd promised the girl that her mother would be okay. "Keep trying. I'm heading to the precinct now. Maybe there's something in her background, family, friends, someone she might turn to. Already pulling that information. I'll have it waiting when you get here." Sarah disconnected and looked down at Max. "Come on, partner. We've got work to do." The drive to the precinct was tense, Sarah's eyes constantly checking her mirrors, alert for any sign that she was being followed. The threatening text message from the night before felt like a weight in her pocket, a constant reminder that she was now a target just as much as Maria was. The bullpen was bustling with morning shift activity when Sarah arrived, but Rodriguez was already at his desk, multiple files spread out before him, and his computer screen filled with data. He looked up as Sarah approached, his expression grim. "I've been going through Maria Vasquez's background. She's been in the U.S. for 8 years, originally from Guatemala. She has no family here except for Emma. She works, or worked, as a housekeeper for a cleaning service that contracts with several businesses around the city." Sarah leaned over the desk, scanning the information. "Which businesses?" Rodriguez highlighted several entries on the screen. 3 hotels, 2 office buildings, and, this is interesting, she was assigned to clean Chen's restaurant twice a week. Chen. The same Chen who was arrested yesterday. Sarah felt the pieces beginning to click together. She wasn't just a random victim, Rodriguez. She saw something. Maybe she witnessed something at that restaurant, something that made her a liability. That would explain why they came after her. If she could connect Chen to illegal activities, then she's a witness they needed to silence. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. We need to find her before they do. If they were bold enough to threaten a cop, they won't hesitate to go after a vulnerable witness. I've put out a bolo for her and the daughter. Every unit in the city is watching for them. But Sarah... Rodriguez paused, his expression troubled. You need to consider the possibility that Maria might not want to be found by us either. If she's undocumented, if she's scared of deportation, or if they've threatened her family back in Guatemala, she might see us as just another threat. Sarah knew he was right, but the thought of Emma and Maria out there alone, hunted by men with resources and no conscience, made her stomach turn. Then we need to give her a reason to trust us. We need to show her that we're not the enemy, that we can protect her. Can we, though? Rodriguez asked quietly. Can we really promise her protection when we don't even know the full scope of what we're dealing with? When someone was able to get to her in a hospital and threaten you directly? It was the question Sarah had been avoiding since the text message last night. The truth was, she didn't know if they could keep Maria safe. She didn't know how deep this conspiracy went or how many people were involved. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. We have to try, Sarah said firmly. Because if we don't, if we let fear and uncertainty stop us, then what's the point of wearing this badge? What's the point of any of this? Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, then let's figure out where Maria would go. If she's running scared, she's not going to go somewhere obvious. She'll need money, shelter, and a way to disappear. Let's start with her financial records, see if there are any recent withdrawals or unusual transactions. They spent the next several hours digging through every piece of information they could find on Maria Vasquez. Bank records showed a modest savings account with a recent withdrawal of $2,000, made just 2 days before the incident at her apartment. Phone records revealed several calls to a number registered to a Catholic church in Decatur. The church, Sarah said suddenly. If she's scared and has nowhere else to go, she might seek sanctuary there. It's a tradition in immigrant communities, churches as safe havens. It's worth checking out. Rodriguez was already grabbing his jacket. Let's go. St. Mary's Catholic Church in Decatur was a modest brick building with a white steeple, nestled in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The morning mass had just ended when Sarah and Rodriguez arrived, and a handful of parishioners were making their way out into the parking lot. Father Miguel Santos, the parish priest, was greeting people at the door when the officers approached. He was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and silver hair, wearing the traditional black cassock of his office. His expression grew cautious when he saw the uniforms and badges. "Officers, how can I help you?" His accent carried the soft lilt of Central America. "Father Santos, I'm Officer Sarah Collins, and this is Detective James Rodriguez. We're looking for someone we believe may have sought help from your church. A woman named Maria Vasquez and her daughter Emma." Something flickered in the priest's eyes. Recognition, concern, and something that looked like protective instinct. "I cannot reveal information about my parishioners, officer. The confessional seal." "Father, I understand your position, but Maria and Emma may be in serious danger." Sarah kept her voice gentle but firm. "Men who threatened and assaulted Maria are still out there. They may be looking for her. We're not trying to get her in trouble. We're trying to help her, to protect her." "Many people come to the church seeking protection," Father Santos said carefully. "They come because they trust that we will provide sanctuary, that we will not turn them over to authorities who might deport them or separate them from their children. You ask me to betray that trust." Rodriguez stepped forward. "Father, we're not ICE. We're not here about immigration status. We're investigating a human trafficking operation. Maria is a witness to crimes that have victimized countless women. If she has information that can help us stop these criminals, she could save lives. But more importantly, if she's in danger, we need to help her before it's too late." The priest's expression softened slightly, and he glanced back toward the church building. "Come inside, but understand, I make no promises." They followed him into the cool interior of the church, the smell of incense and old wood surrounding them. Stained glass windows cast colored light across the pews, and votive candles flickered in their stands near the altar. Father Santos led them to a small office off the main sanctuary, closing the door behind them. "Maria Vasquez came to me 3 months ago," he began, his voice heavy with concern. "She was scared then, too. She told me she had seen something terrible where she worked, something that made her fear for her life and for Emma's safety. She asked me to pray for her, to help her find a way to escape." Sarah leaned forward. "What did she see, Father?" She would not tell me specifics, only that women were being held against their will, that men were treating them as property, buying and selling them like merchandise. She was ashamed to admit that she had kept silent out of fear for so long, but seeing what those women were enduring finally became too much for her conscience. "Did she mention any names? Any locations?" Father Santos hesitated, then opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She gave me this, asked me to keep it safe. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should give it to the police." Sarah took the paper with trembling hands and unfolded it. It was a list of addresses, matching several of the locations from the burner phone, along with dates and times. At the bottom, in Maria's careful handwriting, were 3 names: Victor Kozlov, Marcus Chen, and Diego Ramirez. "She knew," Sarah breathed. "She knew all along who they were and what they were doing. She knew, and she was terrified," Father Santos confirmed. "When she came to me yesterday morning, before the incident at her apartment, she was even more frightened than usual. She said they had discovered that she was asking questions, that she had been taking photos with her phone of the women being moved. She thought they would kill her." "Father, where is she now?" Rodriguez's voice was urgent. "Is she here?" The priest's expression grew pained. "She was here last night. She came after leaving the hospital, desperate and afraid. I gave her shelter, money, and the name of someone who could help her get out of the city safely. But this morning, when I went to check on her and Emma, they were gone." Sarah's heart sank. "Did she say where she was going?" "No, and I think that was intentional. The less I knew, the less I could tell anyone who came looking." Father Santos looked at them imploringly. "You have to understand, these people she's afraid of, they have no respect for the sanctity of the church or for human life. If they find her before you do—" "We understand, Father." Sarah stood, carefully folding the paper and slipping it into her pocket. "Thank you for this information. It could be the key to taking down this operation." As they turned to leave, Father Santos called out, "Officer Collins, if you do find Maria, tell her that she and Emma are in my prayers. Tell her that she is brave and that God sees her courage." "I will, Father." Outside, the morning sun was climbing higher, warming the pavement and chasing away the morning chill. Sarah and Rodriguez stood beside their vehicles, the weight of what they'd learned settling over them. "She was gathering evidence," Rodriguez said, pulling out his phone. "Those photos she mentioned, they might still be on her personal phone. If we can find that phone, or if it's backed up to a cloud service, we might have the evidence we need to nail these guys regardless of whether Maria testifies," Sarah finished. "Rodriguez, we need to get a warrant for Maria's phone records. Find out if she had cloud backup enabled." "I'm on it." Rodriguez was already dialing. "I'll get Morrison to push it through. In the meantime, keep following your instincts on this. You've been right about everything so far." Sarah nodded, watching as Rodriguez walked back to his vehicle, phone pressed to his ear. She looked down at Max, who sat patiently beside her, and felt a surge of determination. They were close. The pieces were falling into place. Maria's list, the burner phone, the connected businesses, it was all coming together. But they were also racing against time. Somewhere in Atlanta, Maria and Emma were hiding, hunted by men who had the resources and the ruthlessness to find them. And when they did, Sarah refused to finish that thought. Instead, she climbed into her vehicle, Max jumping in beside her, and pulled out her phone. She opened the photo of Maria's list that she'd taken and studied it carefully, looking for any detail she might have missed, any clue that might tell her where Maria had gone. And there, at the very bottom of the page, almost too faint to read, was a phone number. Just 10 digits written in pencil and partially erased, as if Maria had second-guessed including it. Sarah dialed the number, her heart pounding as it rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a click and a woman's voice, thick with emotion and fear. "Hello? Maria? Maria Vasquez?" A sharp intake of breath, then silence. Sarah spoke quickly, urgently. "Maria, this is Officer Sarah Collins. Please don't hang up. I'm not calling to arrest you or to force you to do anything you don't want to do. I'm calling because I need your help, and because I think you need mine. Those men who came to your apartment, they're part of something bigger, something that's hurting a lot of people, and I think you already know that." More silence. But Maria hadn't hung up. Sarah pressed on. "I have your list, Maria. Father Santos gave it to me, and I have evidence from the burner phone, but I need your testimony, your photos, everything you know about what's happening. I need your help to stop them so that no one else has to go through what you've been through." Finally, Maria spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "They'll kill me. They'll kill Emma. Not if we protect you. Not if we move fast enough to take them all down at once." Sarah's voice was steady, projecting a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Maria, you trusted me yesterday when you let me help you. I need you to trust me again now. Tell me where you are. Let me bring you in safely. Let's finish this together." The silence stretched on, and Sarah held her breath, waiting for Maria's answer, an answer that would determine not just the fate of this case, but the fate of all the women whose faces were captured in those numbered photos, waiting for someone to care enough to save them. The abandoned motel on the outskirts of East Point looked like something out of a horror movie, peeling paint, broken windows, and a neon sign that had long since stopped working. Sarah pulled her vehicle into the crumbling parking lot, her eyes scanning every shadow, every potential threat. Max sat alert in the back, his keen senses reading the environment with the expertise that only years of training could provide. Maria had given her this address after 10 minutes of tearful conversation, 10 minutes in which Sarah had used every ounce of persuasion she possessed to convince the terrified woman that coming in was the only way to truly protect Emma. The motel was a place Maria knew about from her cleaning service days, a property that had been abandoned for years, waiting for demolition that never seemed to come. Sarah checked her weapon, confirmed that backup was en route, but holding position 2 blocks away as she'd requested, and opened the door for Max. The dog jumped out, immediately going into working mode, his nose testing the air, his body language communicating what Sarah already suspected. They weren't alone here. "Easy, Max," she murmured, her hand on his harness as they approached room 7, the number Maria had specified. Before she could knock, the door opened a crack, and Maria's frightened face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were red from crying, her bruises from yesterday darker and more pronounced in the harsh morning light. Behind her, Sarah could see Emma sitting on one of the beds, clutching a stuffed rabbit that looked like it had seen better days. "You came alone?" Maria's voice was barely audible. "Just me and Max. But Maria, I have backup nearby. If something goes wrong..." "No, no police. Not yet." Maria's hand trembled as she gripped the door. "You don't understand what they're capable of. Last night at the hospital, a nurse came to my room. She said she had a message from Victor. She said that if I talked to the police, they would know, they would find me. And they would make sure Emma ended up in foster care while I went back to Guatemala in a box." Sarah felt a surge of anger at the threat, but kept her voice calm. "Maria, that nurse was trying to scare you. We can protect you from these people." Can you? Maria's eyes were hard now, despite their fear. Can you protect me when they have people in the hospital? When they knew where I was within hours of leaving my apartment? When they can send you threatening text messages? Sarah stiffened. How did you know about that? Because they sent me one too. They sent me pictures, Officer Collins. Pictures of Emma at her school, of Father Santos at the church, of you leaving your apartment building this morning. Maria's voice broke. They're watching all of us. They want us to know they're watching. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Maria anymore. By involving herself in this case, by pushing forward with the investigation, she'd made herself and everyone connected to Maria into targets, the surveillance, the threats. This was an organization with resources far beyond what she'd initially estimated. Let me in, Maria. Please, we need to talk about this face to face. After a long moment, Maria stepped back, opening the door wider. Sarah entered the dingy room, Max at her side, taking in the scene with a professional eye. 2 beds with stained comforters, a bathroom with a broken mirror, fast food wrappers on the table, evidence of a night spent in fear and uncertainty. Emma looked up at Sarah with recognition, and despite everything, the little girl managed a small smile. You came. You kept your promise. Sarah's heart ached at the trust in those words. I always keep my promises, Emma. She turned to Maria. Show me the messages. Show me everything. Maria pulled out her phone with shaking hands and opened her messages. What Sarah saw made her blood run cold. Photos of Emma at school, time-stamped from that very morning. Photos of Father Santos entering the church. And yes, a photo of Sarah leaving her apartment building, Max beside her, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. Beneath each photo was a simple message. We see everything. They're trying to intimidate us into backing down, Sarah said, though her voice was tighter than she wanted it to be. Maria, this is exactly why we need to move forward. If we let them scare us into silence, they win. They continue operating and more women end up as victims. But if we move forward, people die. Maria sank onto the bed beside her daughter, pulling Emma close. How many lives is justice worth, Officer Collins? Is it worth Emma's life? Is it worth yours? It was the question that every cop faced at some point. The cost of doing the right thing when the wrong thing offered safety and silence. Sarah had asked herself that question before, but never with such immediate stakes. She thought of the photos on the burner phone, the numbered women with blank, frightened expressions. She thought of Maria's list, of the multiple locations where victims were likely being held right now. Those women in the photos, Sarah said quietly, crouching down to meet Maria's eyes. The ones being held at those addresses on your list. Do they have children, families, people who love them and are wondering where they are? Maria's eyes filled with tears. Yes, some of them. I heard them crying at night, begging to call their children their mothers. The men would laugh and say their families had already forgotten them, that they belonged to the organization now. Then their lives are worth fighting for too. And if we don't fight, if we let fear win, then we're complicit in their suffering. Sarah reached out and gently took Maria's hand. I can't promise you that this will be easy. I can't promise you that there won't be danger. But I can promise you that I will do everything in my power to protect you and Emma. And I can promise you that we have a real chance to stop these people if we work together. Emma spoke up, her young voice clear in the heavy silence. Mama, the lady cop has a dog. Dogs protect people. That's what you told me when we saw them on TV. Despite the tension, Maria managed a small, sad smile. Yes, mi amor, dogs protect people. Max, as if understanding his cue, moved closer to Emma and gently nuzzled her hand. The little girl giggled softly, some of the fear leaving her face as she stroked Max's head. Sarah watched the interaction and saw something shift in Maria's expression. A mother's calculation, weighing risks and benefits, trying to determine the path that would keep her daughter safest. If I help you, Maria said finally, what happens to us? Where do we go? How do we live, knowing they're out there, looking for us? We put you in protective custody. The department has safe houses, protocols for protecting witnesses in high-profile cases, and once we have enough evidence to arrest everyone involved in this operation, and I mean everyone, from the foot soldiers to the people at the top, the threat level decreases significantly. And if they have people inside the police department, if that's how they knew where to find me at the hospital, it was a possibility Sarah had been trying not to think about, but Maria was right to raise it. The speed with which the organization had responded, the level of surveillance they demonstrated, it suggested either considerable resources or inside information, possibly both. Then we keep the circle small. You, me, Detective Rodriguez, and Captain Morrison. We don't file reports through normal channels. We don't communicate through systems that could be compromised. We operate like we're investigating one of our own until we're certain where the leak is, if there is one. Maria was quiet for a long moment, her hand absently stroking Emma's hair while the little girl continued to pet Max. Finally, she nodded. Okay, I'll tell you everything. But first, you need to see what I have. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old smartphone, the screen cracked but still functional. This is my personal phone, the one they don't know about. I've been documenting everything for 3 months, ever since I first realized what was happening at Chen's restaurant. Sarah took the phone carefully, as if it were made of glass. Tell me what I'm going to find on here. Photos, videos, recordings of conversations I overheard while cleaning. I used to arrive early for my shifts before the restaurant opened. I wanted the extra time to work, and Mr. Chen said it was fine as long as I stayed out of the way. Maria's voice grew stronger as she spoke, as if unburdening herself of this secret was giving her back some measure of control. But what I didn't know was that they used the restaurant for meetings, planning sessions. I would hear them talking while I cleaned the bathrooms or the storage areas. At first, I didn't understand what they were discussing, but then I started to recognize patterns, words that repeated: envío, shipment, mercancía, merchandise. But they weren't talking about food or supplies. They were talking about women. Sarah began scrolling through the phone's photo gallery, and what she saw was even more damning than she'd hoped. Photos of women being led through the back entrance of the restaurant, their hands bound, their faces showing various stages of fear and resignation. Videos of Chen and Kozlov in what appeared to be the restaurant's back office, counting money and examining documents. And audio recordings, dozens of them, time-stamped and labeled with Maria's careful notations. This is incredible, Maria. This is exactly the kind of evidence we need. Sarah looked up, meeting the woman's eyes. Why didn't you go to the police sooner with this? Because I'm undocumented, Officer Collins. Maria's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. I came to this country on a tourist visa 8 years ago and never left. I was afraid that if I went to the police, they would deport me and take Emma away. In Guatemala, we have nothing. No family, no opportunities, no safety. Here at least I can work and give my daughter a chance at a better life, or I thought I could, until I saw what these men were doing and realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. Sarah felt the familiar tension between duty and compassion that came with immigration cases. Legally, Maria's status was a problem. Practically and morally, it was irrelevant compared to the crimes they were investigating. I can't make you any promises about immigration, Sarah said honestly. That's above my pay grade, but what I can tell you is that witnesses who cooperate with major criminal investigations often receive special consideration, and I will personally advocate for you with immigration authorities. Your cooperation could literally save lives, Maria. That has to count for something. Before Maria could respond, Max suddenly stood, his body going rigid, ears forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Sarah's hand went to her weapon immediately, her training taking over. What is it, boy? Max moved toward the door, his growl intensifying. Sarah signaled Maria to get Emma into the bathroom, then moved to the window, carefully pulling back the stained curtain just enough to see outside. 2 SUVs had pulled into the parking lot, blocking her vehicle. 4 men were getting out, all dressed in casual clothes but moving with the coordination of trained operatives. Sarah recognized one of them from the arrest yesterday, an associate of Chen's who'd been at the restaurant when they'd gone to question the staff. "We need to move, now." Sarah pulled out her radio, keying the emergency channel. "Unit 47 to backup teams. I have hostiles approaching my location. 4 armed suspects, 2 vehicles. I have civilians in danger. Move in immediately." Maria emerged from the bathroom. Emma clutched to her chest. "They found us." How did they find us? Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. She'd been careful, had checked for tails, had kept the location off official channels. Then she saw it. Maria's phone, the one with all the evidence, lying on the bed where she'd set it down. The screen was lit up with a notification, and Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. "Your phone. They must have installed tracking software on it when they had access to your apartment." Sarah cursed herself for not thinking of it sooner. "That's how they found the hospital so quickly. That's how they knew you were here." The sound of footsteps on the concrete walkway outside confirmed that they were out of time. Sarah made a split-second decision, the kind that defined careers and sometimes ended lives. "Maria, take Emma and go out the bathroom window. There's an access road behind this building. Run toward it. My backup is 2 blocks north on Sylvan Road. You'll see the police cars. Run to them and don't stop for anything. What about you? Max and I will buy you time. Go, now." Maria hesitated only a second before grabbing her bag and pulling Emma toward the bathroom. Sarah heard the window scraping open as she positioned herself behind the bed, using it as cover, her weapon trained on the door. Max crouched beside her, every muscle coiled and ready, his training making him the perfect partner in this moment. The door exploded inward with a crash, lock and frame splintering under the force of a boot. 2 men rushed in, weapons drawn, and Sarah fired twice, her shots precise and controlled. The first man went down with a cry, clutching his shoulder. The second dove for cover, behind the overturned dresser. "Atlanta PD! Drop your weapons!" Sarah shouted, though she knew the command was merely procedure at this point. The response was a barrage of gunfire that tore through the cheap motel furniture and punched holes in the walls. Sarah kept her head down, returning fire when she had clear shots, while Max barked ferociously, adding to the chaos and confusion. "Max! Guard!" Sarah commanded, and the dog launched himself toward the bathroom, positioning himself between the opening and any potential threat, protecting Maria and Emma's escape route. Sarah heard the sound of the window slamming shut, followed by distant running footsteps. Good. They were clear. Now she just had to survive long enough for backup to arrive. "Officer Collins!" a voice called out from outside, accented and familiar. "Victor Kozlov. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. Give us the woman and the phone, and you can walk away from this." "How about this instead?" Sarah called back, ejecting her spent magazine and slamming in a fresh one. "You surrender now, and maybe you get to live to see a trial." Kozlov's laugh was cold. "I admire your courage, but you're alone, outgunned, and out of options. Your backup isn't coming, Officer Collins. We have people monitoring police frequencies. Your request for help was redirected." Sarah's stomach dropped. If that was true, if the backup wasn't coming, then she really was on her own. But even as the thought crossed her mind, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, multiple units, getting closer fast. "Sounds like you're wrong about that," Sarah called out, allowing herself a grim smile. The gunfire intensified, desperation now driving the attackers. Sarah saw one of them trying to circle around toward the bathroom, and she put 2 rounds into the wall next to him, forcing him back. Max barked aggressively, warning anyone who got close that they'd have to go through him first. Then, with a screech of tires and a flash of blue and red lights, police vehicles flooded the parking lot. Sarah heard Rodriguez's voice over a loudspeaker. "This is the Atlanta Police Department. Drop your weapons and get on the ground. You are surrounded." The men in the motel room exchanged looks, weighing their options. The sound of helicopter rotors overhead added to the overwhelming show of force. The message was clear. There was no escape, no winning this fight. "Your call, gentlemen," Sarah said, her weapon still trained on them. "Die here in a shootout, or live to maybe walk free someday on a technicality. I know which one I'd choose." One by one, weapons clattered to the floor, hands raised. Sarah kept her gun up until Rodriguez and his team stormed in, securing the suspects with practiced efficiency. Only then did she lower her weapon, her hands shaking with the adrenaline crash that always came after situations like this. "Collins, you okay?" Rodriguez asked, moving to her side while his officers hauled the suspects out. "I'm fine, but they had tracking software on Maria's phone. That's how they found us so fast." Sarah moved to the bathroom, calling out, "Max, come!" The dog emerged from the bathroom, unharmed, but still in high alert mode. Sarah ran her hands over him, checking for injuries, relieved to find none. "Where are Maria and Emma?" Rodriguez asked. "I sent them out the back. They should have reached your perimeter by now." Rodriguez spoke into his radio, and a moment later, confirmation came back. "We've got them. They're safe, both of them unharmed." Sarah felt a wave of relief so intense it almost brought her to her knees. They'd made it. Maria and Emma had made it out. "We need to move them to a secure location," Sarah said, holstering her weapon. "And we need to do it without leaving any kind of electronic trail. These people have resources we're only beginning to understand." Already arranged, Captain Morrison set up a safe house off the books, a property owned by his brother-in-law. No connection to the department on paper. "We'll transport them there now." As they walked out of the destroyed motel room, Sarah saw the 4 attackers being loaded into police vehicles, their faces tight with anger and fear. She also saw something else, Kozlov, standing with 2 men in expensive suits who had the unmistakable air of high-priced lawyers. "How did he get out?" Sarah demanded. Rodriguez's expression darkened. "State Department pulled strings. He's officially been released pending a diplomatic review. His lawyers are arguing that his presence at Maria's apartment was consensual, that the arrest was unlawful, and that this attack on the motel was him attempting to protect a friend from what he believed was a rogue police officer." "That's insane. We have evidence. We have Maria's testimony and a burner phone. His lawyers are already claiming the phone was planted, and without Maria willing to testify in court, which she wasn't until about an hour ago, the case was weak." Rodriguez put a hand on her shoulder. "But Sarah, that's changed now. We have her testimony. We have her phone with all that evidence. And now we have these 4 idiots who attacked a police officer. That's attempted murder of an officer, which means they're facing serious time. And people facing serious time tend to be very interested in making deals." Sarah looked at the suspects being processed, then at Kozlov, who met her gaze with a slight smile. The message was clear. He thought he was untouchable, protected by his connections and his credentials. "We need to move fast," Sarah said, "before his people can destroy evidence or relocate the victims. Already working on it. While you were dealing with this situation, I've been coordinating with Vice and the FBI. We've got surveillance set up on all the properties from Maria's list. The moment we have probable cause, we're hitting them simultaneously. And probable cause comes from Maria's testimony and her evidence. The photos, the videos, the recordings. We're meeting with the district attorney in 2 hours. If she agrees that we have enough for warrants, and I think she will, we execute raids tomorrow morning at dawn." Sarah nodded, feeling the pieces falling into place. This was it. This was the moment when all the danger, all the risk, would either pay off or fall apart. They had one shot to dismantle this organization, to free the victims, and to bring the perpetrators to justice. "I want to be there," Sarah said, "for the raids. I want to be part of taking these people down." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Collins. You've earned your place at that table." His expression grew serious. "But Sarah, you need to understand what we're dealing with here. These aren't street-level criminals. Kozlov's involvement suggests international connections, possibly organized crime, with ties to foreign governments. Going after them means going after people with resources, with protection, with the ability to make problems disappear." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "I got a taste of that today. She looked down at Max, who sat patiently beside her, and felt a surge of gratitude for her partner's unwavering presence. In a world where nothing seemed certain, where trust was a commodity in short supply, Max's loyalty was absolute. "Come on, boy," she said softly. "Let's go check on Maria and Emma." The safe house was a modest ranch-style home in suburban Smyrna, indistinguishable from the dozens of other houses on the quiet street. Sarah arrived to find Maria and Emma sitting in the living room with a female officer Sarah recognized from victim services, Officer Janet Chen, no relation to Marcus Chen, who specialized in working with traumatized witnesses. Emma's face lit up when she saw Sarah and Max walk in. "You're okay, I was worried about you." Sarah knelt down, touched by the child's concern. "I'm fine, Emma. Max and I are both fine, and you were very brave, doing exactly what your mom told you to do." Maria stood, wrapping her arms around herself as if she was cold, despite the comfortable temperature. "They tried to kill you because of me, because I got you involved in this." "No," Sarah said firmly. "They tried to kill me because they're criminals who are afraid of being caught. You're not responsible for their choices, Maria. You're the victim here, not the villain." "Officer Collins is right," Janet Chen added, her voice gentle but professional. "What you've done, coming forward with your evidence, agreeing to testify, that takes incredible courage. You're saving lives." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I just want my daughter to be safe. I want to be able to sleep without wondering if someone's going to break down the door. Is that too much to ask?" "It's not too much to ask at all," Sarah assured her. "And that's exactly what we're working toward. Tomorrow morning, we're executing search warrants on all the locations you identified. With your testimony and evidence, we're going to shut down this entire operation." "And then what?" Maria asked quietly. "Even if you arrest everyone, even if you stop this particular group, there will be others. There are always others, men who see women as things to be bought and sold, who don't care about the lives they destroy." Sarah couldn't argue with that. It was a truth she'd learned over years of police work, that evil was a hydra, growing new heads even as you cut off the old ones. But that didn't mean you stopped fighting. "You're right," Sarah admitted. "There will always be others. But every operation we take down, every victim we free, every trafficker we put behind bars, it matters. It matters to the women we save. It matters to their families. And it sends a message that Atlanta won't tolerate this kind of evil in our city." Emma had moved to sit beside Max, her small hand buried in his fur. "Does your dog catch bad guys?" she asked Sarah. "He does. Max is very good at his job. He's helped put a lot of bad people in jail." "Will he help catch the men who hurt my mom?" Sarah smiled. "He already has, sweetheart. Max was very brave today, just like you and your mom." As if understanding he was being praised, Max's tail wagged slightly, though his eyes remained alert, still in protection mode, even in this supposedly safe environment. Rodriguez arrived an hour later with news. The district attorney had reviewed Maria's evidence and had already begun drafting warrants. The raids would proceed as planned at 6 a.m. the following morning, hitting 5 locations simultaneously: Chen's restaurant, 2 warehouse facilities, an apartment complex in Bankhead, and a commercial building near the airport. "We're pulling in resources from every available unit," Rodriguez explained, spreading a map across the safe house's dining room table. "SWAT for the warehouse locations, vice and human trafficking units for victim extraction and processing, forensics to document everything. This is going to be the biggest coordinated operation the department has run in years." Sarah studied the map, noting the strategic positioning of the properties. They've spread out deliberately. If one location is compromised, the others can be evacuated or evidence destroyed. That's why we're hitting them all at once. Total surprise, overwhelming force, and simultaneous execution. They won't have time to warn each other or destroy evidence. Maria had been listening quietly, and now she spoke up. "There's something else you should know. Something I haven't told you yet." Both officers turned to look at her. Maria took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what she was about to reveal. "There's a 6th location. One that's not on my list because I only learned about it 2 days ago, right before they came for me. It's a private residence in Buckhead. Very expensive, very exclusive. That's where they keep the highest value merchandise. Sarah felt sick at the casual way Maria used that term, merchandise, knowing it referred to human beings. "Whose residence?" Rodriguez asked, pulling out his notepad. "I don't know the name, but I overheard Kozlov and Chen talking about it. They called it the Manor. Now, they said that's where the special clients come, the ones who pay premium prices for what they call pristine inventory." The implications were clear and horrifying. "You're saying they run a location where clients come to select victims?" Maria nodded, her face pale. "And not just any clients. They mentioned judges, businessmen, politicians, people with power and money who know they can get away with it because of who they are." Rodriguez and Sarah exchanged glances. If Maria was right, if there really was a location catering to Atlanta's elite, then this case had just become exponentially more complicated and dangerous. "We need to find that location," Sarah said. "If we raid the other 5 sites and miss the manor, they'll evacuate it and we'll lose those victims." "But we don't have an address," Rodriguez pointed out. "Just a vague description of a house in Buckhead, which is full of mansions and expensive properties." "I can help you find it," Maria said quietly. "Chen had a GPS device in his office. I saw the address programmed into it when I was cleaning one day. I didn't write it down, but I remember the street name, Tuxedo Road." Rodriguez was already pulling up property records on his tablet. "Tuxedo Road. That's old money territory. Let me see what we have. Okay, there are 14 properties on that street. Most are owned by families who've been there for generations, a few by corporations or trusts." "Look for recent acquisitions," Sarah suggested. "Something purchased in the last few years, maybe through a shell company." Rodriguez scrolled through the records, his expression growing more intent. "Here, a property purchased 18 months ago through something called Meridian Holdings LLC. Paid cash, no mortgage, minimal public record. That has to be it." "Can we get a warrant for that location too?" "Not without more evidence. A hunch and a street name isn't enough for a judge to sign off on searching a multi-million-dollar property in one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods." Rodriguez leaned back, frustrated. "We need something concrete." Maria stood suddenly and went to the bag she'd been carrying, digging through it until she found her phone again. "Wait, I took photos that day, of the GPS screen. I take pictures of everything. It's a habit I developed when I realized what was happening. Let me check." She scrolled through hundreds of photos, years of documentation that she'd collected while cleaning, while observing, while bearing witness to crimes that most people never wanted to acknowledge existed. Finally, she stopped, enlarging a photo and showing it to them. There it was, a GPS screen showing 2847 Tuxedo Road, Atlanta, GA. The date stamp showed it was from 2 weeks ago. "That's our evidence," Sarah said, a fierce satisfaction building in her chest. "Maria, you are absolutely incredible." Rodriguez was already on his phone with the DA's office. "We'll need to move fast. If we're adding a 6th location, especially one in Buckhead, we'll need additional resources and clearances. This is going to rattle some cages." "Good," Sarah said. "It's time some cages got rattled." Jai. As Rodriguez coordinated with the DA and other agencies, Sarah sat with Maria and Emma, going over the timeline for the next day. Maria would remain at the safe house during the raids, guarded by officers Sarah trusted. If everything went according to plan, by tomorrow afternoon, the trafficking operation would be dismantled, the victims freed and the perpetrators in custody, if everything went according to plan. But Sarah had been a cop long enough to know that things rarely went exactly according to plan. There would be complications, surprises, moments when split-second decisions would determine whether people lived or died. All she could do was prepare as best she could, trust in her training and her instincts, and lean on the partnership with Max that had carried them through countless dangerous situations before. As the evening wore on and the plans solidified, Sarah finally allowed herself to think about what came after. about the women they would hopefully free, the trauma they'd have to help them process, the long legal battles ahead, about Maria and Emma and whether they'd be allowed to stay in the country or face deportation despite their cooperation, about her own life and whether she'd be able to go back to regular patrol after this, or whether crossing these kinds of powerful people would have permanent consequences for her career. But those were concerns for later. Right now, there was work to do, justice to pursue, victims to save. Sarah looked at Max, who had settled beside Emma's chair, allowing the little girl to use him as a pillow while she dozed fitfully. The dog's eyes met Sarah's, and in them she saw the reflection of her own determination. Tomorrow they would see this through. Tomorrow they would bring light into the darkest corners of Atlanta's criminal underworld. Tomorrow they would prove that even the most powerful criminals couldn't escape justice if someone was brave enough to stand against them. And Sarah Collins had never backed down from a fight in her life. Dawn broke over Atlanta with a blood-red sky, the kind of morning that old-timers said meant a storm was coming. Sarah Collins stood in the staging area, an abandoned warehouse 2 miles from their primary target, watching the sun paint the clouds crimson while officers from multiple agencies prepared for what would be the most significant operation in Atlanta's recent history. She'd gotten maybe 2 hours of sleep, her mind too wired with adrenaline and anticipation to truly rest. Max sat beside her, alert and focused, sensing the energy in the air that always preceded major operations. Around them, SWAT officers checked their gear, vice detectives reviewed victim extraction protocols, and federal agents from the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force coordinated communications. Captain Morrison approached, his face grim but determined in the early morning light. "Collins, you ready for this?" "Yes, sir." "Rodriguez briefed me on what happened at the motel yesterday. You handled yourself well under fire." Morrison paused, choosing his words carefully. "This operation is going to be dangerous. We're hitting 6 locations simultaneously, and we have to assume that at least some of these sites will have armed security. I need to know that you and Max are up for this." Sarah met her captain's eyes without flinching. "We're ready, sir. This is what we've been training for." Morrison nodded slowly. "You'll be with Rodriguez's team at the warehouse on Fulton Industrial. Intelligence suggests that's where they're holding the largest number of victims. It's also likely to be the most heavily defended. SWAT will breach first, but we'll need K9 for building clearance and suspect tracking if anyone rabbits." "Understood, sir." "Collins," Morrison's voice softened slightly, "I know this case has become personal for you. Emma and her mother, I get it. But I need you to keep your head clear in there. Personal investment can make you hesitate at the wrong moment or rush in when patience is called for. Can you maintain objectivity?" Sarah thought about Emma's terrified face, about Maria's bruises, about the numbered photos of women whose names she didn't even know. "This is personal, Captain. I won't deny that, but that's not going to cloud my judgment. If anything, it makes me more focused. These women need us to be perfect today, and I don't intend to disappoint them." Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, briefing in 5 minutes. Let's bring these people home." The briefing room was packed with law enforcement personnel, everyone listening intently as the operation commander, Lieutenant Sarah Chen from SWAT, laid out the tactical plan. Large screens showed aerial photos of each target location, entry points marked in red, evacuation routes in green. "Simultaneous breach at 0600 hours. Chen's voice was crisp and authoritative. "That gives us exactly 15 minutes from now. Teams Alpha through Delta will hit the warehouse locations. Team Echo takes the restaurant. Team Foxtrot handles the apartment complex. And Team Golf," she highlighted the property on Tuxedo Road, "will execute the warrant on the Buckhead residence." Sarah noted the additional resources assigned to the Buckhead location. 2 SWAT elements, FBI agents, and what looked like representatives from the State Attorney General's office. They weren't taking any chances with a property that allegedly catered to Atlanta's elite. Rules of engagement are standard. Identify yourselves clearly, use force only as necessary to protect lives and secure suspects. Remember, our primary mission is victim rescue. Everyone else is secondary. These women have been through hell. Let's make sure we don't add to their trauma by being cowboys in there. Rodriguez appeared at Sarah's side as the briefing concluded. You and Max, stick with me. We go in after SWAT clears the entry points. Fan out to search the upper floors. Building specs show it's a 3-story structure, about 40,000 square feet. Plenty of places to hide victims or destroy evidence. What's our expected resistance level? Unknown. Could be anything from a couple of guards to a well-armed security team. Intelligence suggests Chen runs a professional operation, which means professional security. But they're not expecting us, so we have the advantage of surprise. Sarah checked her gear one final time. Vest secure, weapon loaded, radio functioning. Max's tactical harness properly fitted with his identification and camera. The dog looked up at her with those intelligent eyes, and she felt a surge of confidence. They'd been through dangerous situations before. They knew how to work together, how to trust each other when things went wrong. All teams, this is command. You are go for execution. Repeat, you are go. Breach in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute, execute, execute. The convoy of vehicles moved out with practiced precision. 6 separate teams heading to 6 separate locations, all connected by radio, all moving with the same purpose. Sarah's team raced through the early morning streets toward Fulton Industrial Boulevard, sirens silent, lights off, maintaining the element of surprise for as long as possible. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive concrete structure surrounded by chain-link fence. A few cars in the parking lot suggesting overnight security. The SWAT van screeched to a halt at the main gate, and armored officers poured out like a tactical flood. "Breach team, you're up!" Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the radio. The gate went down with a portable ram, and the SWAT team surged forward. Sarah waited in her vehicle with Max and Rodriguez, watching through the windshield as the tactical team approached the main entrance. Flashbangs detonated with ear-splitting cracks, smoke billowing from the doorway. Main entrance secured. Moving to interior. Sarah's radio came alive with reports from other teams. Team Echo reporting. Restaurant is clear, no resistance. We have 4 victims secured. Team Delta. Warehouse 2 has armed guards. Shots fired. Officer down. Request medical. Sarah's stomach clenched. Someone was already hurt, and they were just beginning. Team Foxtrot. Apartment complex is clear. Multiple victims, approximately 15 women. Requesting additional victim services. Rodriguez grabbed his tactical vest. That's our cue. SWAT's cleared the entry. Let's move. Sarah released Max from his compartment, and together they ran toward the warehouse. The smell of flashbang residue hung in the air, mixing with the industrial odors of oil and metal. Through the shattered doorway, Sarah could see SWAT officers securing suspects. 3 men face down on the concrete floor with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Second floor clear. Third floor, contact armed suspect on the move. Gunfire erupted from somewhere above them. Sarah and Rodriguez took cover behind a concrete pillar while Max stayed close, reading the situation, waiting for commands. SWAT officers were advancing up a metal staircase to the second floor, their movements coordinated and professional despite the hostile fire. K9 unit, command needs you on the second floor. We have reports of women locked in rooms, but we can't locate all of them. We need Max to do a sweep. Copy that, moving to second floor. Sarah signaled Max to heel, and they advanced toward the stairs, Rodriguez covering their approach with his weapon drawn. The second floor was a maze of offices and storage rooms, converted into makeshift living quarters, with locks on the outside of the doors. SWAT had already breached several rooms, and Sarah could see women huddled inside. Some crying, some too shocked to react, all bearing the haunted expressions of people who'd been living in fear for far too long. "Max, search," Sarah commanded, and the dog immediately went to work. his nose testing the air, his body language communicating what his senses were telling him. Max led them down a corridor, past empty rooms and storage areas, until he stopped at what appeared to be a solid wall. But his behavior said otherwise. Pawing at the baseboard, whining softly, every signal indicating that something was behind that wall. "There's a hidden space here," Sarah said, running her hands along the wall. "A false wall, maybe." Rodriguez examined the structure more carefully, finally finding a nearly invisible seam. "Here, it's a panel." He pushed, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow hallway leading to another set of rooms. The smell hit them first. Unwashed bodies, human waste, fear. Sarah felt her rage building but forced it down, channeling it into focus. These women needed help, not an angry cop. 3 rooms at the end of the hidden corridor, each locked with heavy padlocks. Rodriguez shot them off, while Sarah called for medical assistance. Inside the first room they found 5 women, ages ranging from late teens to early 30s, all showing signs of severe malnutrition and abuse. "It's okay," Sarah said gently, holstering her weapon and raising her hands to show she meant no harm. "We're police. We're here to help you. You're safe now." Most of the women just stared, as if unable to process what was happening. One younger woman, barely out of her teens, started sobbing uncontrollably. Another backed into a corner, clearly terrified even of rescue. "I need victim services up here now," Sarah spoke urgently into her radio. "We have multiple traumatized victims who need immediate medical and psychological support." Max, sensing the fear in the room, approached slowly, his body language non-threatening. One of the women reached out tentatively to touch his head, and Max stayed perfectly still, allowing the contact. It was a small moment of connection, but Sarah saw something shift in the woman's expression, a tiny crack in the wall of trauma, a glimpse of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was over. Rodriguez cleared the other 2 rooms, finding 7 more women in similar conditions. 12 victims total in the hidden section alone, and based on the reports coming in from other areas of the warehouse, they were looking at over 30 women who'd been held here. "All teams, this is command. We have a situation at the Buckhead location. Team Gulf is reporting heavy resistance, multiple armed suspects, and possible hostage situation. All available units redirect to provide backup." Sarah's blood ran cold. The manor, the location where they kept the premium inventory, was turning into a firefight. "Rodriguez, we need to go." "Negative, Collins. We're needed here. Let's SWAT handle Buckhead." But Sarah was already moving, Max at her heels. She couldn't explain it, couldn't justify it with logic, but every instinct she had was screaming that she needed to be at that location. Something about the way the call had come through, the urgency in the commander's voice. This was worse than a standard armed resistance. She made it to her vehicle and was pulling out of the parking lot before Rodriguez could stop her, though she heard him cursing and running for his own car to follow. The drive to Buckhead took 15 minutes that felt like hours, the radio crackling with increasingly dire updates. "Suspect has barricaded himself with at least 4 hostages. Demands to speak with Victor Kozlov, says if he doesn't get diplomatic immunity, he'll execute the hostages one by one." Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. This was falling apart. The careful planning, the coordinated execution. It was all unraveling at the one location where they couldn't afford failure. Tuxedo Road was blocked off, police vehicles creating a perimeter around a massive colonial-style mansion set back from the street by manicured lawns and tall hedges. Sarah badged her way past the outer perimeter, leaving Max in the vehicle for the moment while she got the situation brief from the incident commander. "Suspect is Diego Ramirez, one of the men you arrested yesterday. Apparently he made bail this morning. His lawyer got him out on some technicality. He came straight here, got inside before we breached, and now he's holding 4 women hostage in the main bedroom. Says he'll kill them if we try to force entry. Where's SWAT? Setting up for a tactical entry, but it's delicate. The room has no exterior windows, only one entrance, and it's a fatal funnel. If we go in hot, hostages die. If we wait him out, he gets more desperate and hostages still might die. Sarah looked up at the mansion, at the second-story window where she knew Ramirez was holed up with 4 terrified women. She thought about Emma, about Maria, about all the women they'd freed from the warehouse. And she thought about the women still trapped inside that room, whose lives hung in the balance of one desperate man's decisions. "Let me talk to him," Sarah said suddenly. "Collins, you're not a negotiator." "No, but I'm the one who arrested him. I'm the one whose investigation brought all this down. Maybe he'll listen to me." The commander hesitated, then nodded slowly. 5 minutes. If you can't establish rapport in 5 minutes, we're going tactical. Sarah was fitted with a communication device and escorted to a position just outside the bedroom door. She could hear Ramirez inside, his voice loud and agitated, switching between English and Spanish. The women weren't making a sound, which somehow made it worse. "Diego," Sarah called out, keeping her voice calm and professional. "It's Officer Collins, the one from yesterday. I need to talk to you." Silence. Then, "You're the one who destroyed everything. You should have minded your own business. I know you're angry. I know you feel trapped. But Diego, this doesn't have to end with anyone else getting hurt. Let those women go and we can talk about your situation." "My situation?" His laugh was bitter. "I'm going to prison for life, or worse, they'll send me back to Colombia and the people I work for, the people your investigation exposed, they'll kill me before I even reach the airport. I'm a dead man either way." Sarah processed that quickly. He wasn't worried about police charges. He was worried about retribution from the organization they'd disrupted. That fear could be useful. "We can protect you, Diego. Witness protection, a new identity, relocation. But only if you give us something valuable, only if you cooperate fully and don't hurt anyone else." "Witness protection?" He laughed again, more manic this time. "You don't understand who we're dealing with. These people have reach everywhere. Victor has connections in governments across 3 continents. Chen's organization has been operating for over a decade. You think you've stopped anything? You've just inconvenienced them. Then help us really stop them. Tell us everything you know. Give us the names at the top, the ones pulling the strings. Help us take down the whole organization, not just the street level." There was a long pause. Sarah held her breath, aware of SWAT officers positioned on either side of the door, ready to breach the moment things went wrong. "The women," Ramirez said finally, his voice quieter. "They're just merchandise to the organization. But to me, I knew some of them before, from my neighborhood in Bogotá. They were promised jobs, better lives. Instead, they got this. If I let them go, will you promise to help them, to not just deport them back to situations that are just as bad? I can't control immigration policy, Diego, but I can promise that we'll treat them as victims, not criminals. We'll connect them with services, with advocates who can fight for them to stay. I can promise that we'll try." Another long pause. Then the sound of a lock clicking. The door opened a crack, and a young woman stumbled out crying, her clothes torn. Then another and another, 4 women total, all terrified but alive and unharmed. SWAT officers immediately moved in, securing the women and pushing into the room. Sarah heard Ramirez shout something in Spanish, heard a weapon clatter to the floor, and then the sound of him being taken into custody. It was over. The hostage situation had been resolved without bloodshed. Sarah leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly shaky with relief. Max had been brought up by a handler, and the dog immediately came to her side, pressing against her leg in that way he did when he sensed she needed support. "You did good, Collins," the incident commander said, approaching her. "That could have gone very badly, but you read him right, made him see a way out." Sarah just nodded, still processing what Ramirez had said. Victor's connections, Chen's decade-long operation. The implication that what they'd done today was just scratching the surface of something much larger. Rodriguez found her 20 minutes later, after the scene had been secured and the victims were being transported to hospitals. "You went rogue on me, Collins. I know, I'm sorry, I just saved 4 lives and convinced a suspect to cooperate with our investigation, giving us leverage to go after the higher-ups in this organization. Rodriguez's stern expression softened into something like admiration. Captain's going to chew you out for breaking protocol, but between you and me, it was the right call. The final tally from all 6 locations came in as the morning turned to afternoon. 63 victims freed, 63 women who'd been trafficked, exploited, and held against their will. 17 suspects in custody, including several guards and mid-level operators. More importantly, they'd seized computers, phones, financial records, and documentation that would take months to fully process, but which promised to reveal the full scope of the operation. Sarah returned to the safe house in Smyrna that evening, exhausted but wired, to find Maria and Emma waiting anxiously for news. The moment Emma saw her, the little girl ran across the room and threw her arms around Sarah's waist. "You did it! You saved my mom's friends!" Sarah hugged the child back, feeling the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. "We did it together, Emma. You and your mom were the ones who made this possible. You were the heroes." Maria stood more slowly, her eyes red from crying. How many women did you find?" 63, Sarah said quietly. 63 women who are free now because you were brave enough to speak up." Maria's legs seemed to give out, and she sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands as sobs shook her body. They were tears of relief, of guilt that she hadn't acted sooner, of grief for all the suffering she'd witnessed. Sarah sat beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "What happens now?" Maria asked when she'd regained some composure. "To me, to Emma. Now we prepare for the trials. Diego Ramirez has agreed to cooperate in exchange for witness protection. He's already given us names, locations, financial information that's going to break this case wide open. We're going to need your testimony too, but with Ramirez corroborating everything, the case is solid." "And immigration?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I spoke with the State Attorney General's office. Given your cooperation with this investigation, they're recommending that you and Emma be granted special visas under the Victims of Trafficking Protection Act. It's not automatic, and there will be paperwork and hearings, but the odds are in your favor. You helped save 63 lives, Maria. That counts for something." Fresh tears spilled down Maria's cheeks, but these seemed different. Tears of hope rather than despair. "Thank you. Thank you for believing me, for protecting us, for seeing us as people instead of just problems." Emma had moved to sit with Max, who had sprawled out on the floor, looking as exhausted as Sarah felt. The little girl was telling the dog about her day, about how scared she'd been, but how she'd kept being brave like her mum told her to be. Max listened with the patience that made him such an exceptional K9, occasionally licking Emma's hand or nuzzling closer. Rodriguez called later that evening with more updates. Viktor Kozlov had been rearrested based on evidence seized during the raids, and this time the State Department wasn't interfering. Diplomatic credentials or not, the documentation of his involvement in trafficking was too extensive to ignore. Marcus Chen was in custody and already making noise about cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. The web was unraveling, with each arrested suspect looking to save themselves by giving up everyone above them. "We're going to be working this case for months," Rodriguez said. "Following the money, tracking down every member of the organization, freeing every victim we can find. This is career-making work, Collins. You know that, right?" Sarah looked at Emma and Maria, at the small family that had found safety because a scared little girl had run to a police officer for help. She thought about the 63 women who tonight would sleep in beds without locks on the outside of their doors. She thought about all the work still ahead, the testimonies to gather, the trials to prepare for, the healing that would take years. "It's not about my career, Rodriguez. It never was. I know. That's what makes you good at this job. You still believe in justice, not just conviction rates." He paused. "Get some rest, Collins. Tomorrow, we start building the cases that are going to put these people away for the rest of their lives." After the call ended, Sarah sat in the quiet living room, Max's head resting on her lap, while Emma dozed against her mother on the couch. The television played softly in the background, some late-night program that no one was really watching. For the first time in days, Sarah allowed herself to feel the full weight of exhaustion, physical, emotional, mental. They'd won today. They'd saved lives and disrupted a major criminal operation. But Ramirez's words haunted her. "You think you've stopped anything? You've just inconvenienced them." Was he right? Was this trafficking network just one head of a much larger hydra? Would new operators simply fill the void left by Kozlov and Chen's arrest? Maybe. Probably. But that didn't make what they'd done meaningless. 63 women were free. Emma and Maria were safe. And the message had been sent that Atlanta wouldn't tolerate this kind of evil, that there were cops willing to risk everything to protect the vulnerable. Sarah looked down at Max, her faithful partner who'd been with her through every dangerous moment, every difficult decision. The dog's eyes opened, meeting hers with that unspoken understanding that transcended the barrier between species. They were in this together, partners in the truest sense, committed to standing between innocence and evil for as long as they wore the badge. "Good boy, Max," Sarah whispered, running her hand over his head. "You're such a good boy." His tail wagged once in acknowledgement, and then his eyes closed again, content in the knowledge that his work for the day was done, and that tomorrow they would do it all over again. Because that's what heroes did. They showed up day after day. Even when the work was hard and the odds were against them, they stood their ground and fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. And Sarah Collins, with her faithful partner Max beside her, had never been anything less than a hero. 3 weeks had passed since the raids that had shaken Atlanta's criminal underworld to its core. Sarah Collins sat in the courtroom gallery, Max resting quietly at her feet, watching as the prosecutor laid out the evidence against Viktor Kozlov. The trial had begun 2 days earlier, and already the testimony had been damning. Financial records showing millions of dollars in illegal transactions, witness statements from freed victims, and Diego Ramirez's detailed cooperation painting a picture of an organization that had operated with impunity for far too long. Maria sat several rows ahead, flanked by victim advocates, her shoulders squared with determination despite the obvious fear. Today was her day to testify, and Sarah had spent hours with her over the past weeks, preparing her for the cross-examination that would inevitably try to discredit her account. The defense attorney, a high-priced lawyer named Jonathan Blackwell, who'd flown in from New York, stood to begin his questioning. He was everything Sarah expected: expensive suit, practice smile, and the kind of smooth confidence that came from winning cases for clients who could afford to buy justice. "Ms. Vasquez," Blackwell began, his tone friendly but with an edge underneath, "you've testified that you witnessed my client engaging in criminal activity. But isn't it true that you yourself were in this country illegally at the time of these alleged observations?" "Objection, Your Honor." The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Chen, was on her feet immediately. "Ms. Vasquez's immigration status is irrelevant to the crimes committed by the defendant. I'm establishing credibility, Your Honor. The witness's willingness to break immigration law speaks to her character and reliability." Judge Margaret Thompson, a stern African-American woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense courtroom management, peered over her glasses at Blackwell. "Overruled, but tread carefully, Counselor. The victim's immigration status does not negate the defendant's alleged crimes." Maria's voice was steady when she answered. "Yes, I was undocumented. I came here to give my daughter a better life, and I worked hard at honest jobs. That doesn't change what I saw these men doing to those women. Women who, like yourself, were also undocumented, correct? Women who came here illegally and then found themselves in unfortunate circumstances?" "Objection!" Ada Chen's voice was sharp. "Counsel is victim-blaming and mischaracterizing human trafficking as unfortunate circumstances." "Sustained. Mr. Blackwell, rephrase your question or move on." Sarah watched Maria's face, saw the flash of anger that crossed it before she regained her composure. They'd prepared for this, the attempts to make the victim seem somehow complicit in their own suffering, but knowing it was coming didn't make it any easier to witness. The questioning continued for another hour, Blackwell trying to poke holes in Maria's timeline, suggesting she'd misunderstood what she'd seen, implying she was cooperating with police only to avoid her own legal troubles. But Maria held firm, her testimony consistent with everything she'd told Sarah from the beginning. When it was over, Maria stepped down from the witness stand, her legs slightly unsteady, but her head held high. Sarah caught her eye and gave her an encouraging nod. Maria managed a small smile in return before being escorted out by the victim advocates. The afternoon session brought more testimony, this time from Detective Rodriguez, who walked the jury through the evidence seized during the raids. Financial records showing payments to Kozlov from Chen's various businesses, text messages coordinating the movement of merchandise, and most damning, the photos from Maria's phone showing women being moved through the restaurant's back entrance, their faces clearly visible along with timestamps and locations. By the time court adjourned for the day, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. The prosecution's case was strong, and even Blackwell's aggressive defense tactics hadn't been able to significantly damage the testimony. But Sarah had been in enough courtrooms to know that verdicts could be unpredictable, and a man with Kozlov's resources and connections wouldn't go down without using every trick in the book. She was walking out of the courthouse, Max at her side, when her phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. "Need you at the precinct. New development. Urgent." Sarah's stomach tightened. Nothing good ever came from urgent messages in the middle of a trial. She drove to the precinct quickly, navigating the afternoon Atlanta traffic with practiced efficiency, and found Rodriguez in the conference room with Captain Morrison and 2 FBI agents she recognized from the human trafficking task force. "Collins, good. Close the door." Morrison's expression was grave. "What's wrong?" One of the FBI agents, Special Agent Marcus Williams, spoke up. "We've been monitoring communications from known associates of the trafficking organization. This morning we intercepted a phone call that suggests there's a plan to eliminate key witnesses before they can testify. Maria Vasquez is at the top of that list." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Oh, what kind of plan? When?" "We don't have all the details yet." The call was vague, probably deliberately so, but the implication was clear. Neutralize the witnesses, discredit the investigation, and make the whole case fall apart. Maria's in protective custody. How would they even access her? "That's what concerns us," Rodriguez said. "Someone would need inside information to find her. The safe house location is classified, known only to a handful of people, which means we have a leak." Sarah finished the thought feeling sick. Someone on the inside is feeding information to the organization. Morrison nodded grimly. "We're conducting an internal investigation, but that takes time we don't have. In the meantime, we need to move Maria and Emma to a more secure location, and we need to do it quietly, without leaving any kind of paper trail that could be intercepted." "Where?" "FBI has a secure facility in rural Georgia, about 90 miles from here. Completely off-grid, no electronic records, guards who are vetted at the highest level. Maria and Emma will stay there until the trial concludes." "When do we move them?" "Tonight, as soon as it's dark. Collins, we want you to be part of the transport team. Maria trusts you, and after what happened at the motel, we know you can handle yourself if things go sideways." Sarah looked down at Max, who was watching her with those attentive eyes. "What about the trial? Maria's supposed to be available for redirect examination if needed." "We'll work around it. Judge Thompson has been briefed on the security situation. She understands." Ada Chen had entered the room looking tired but determined. "Collins, I need Maria alive to testify in the trials for Chen and Ramirez. Without her, we lose our strongest witness. Whatever it takes to keep her safe, that's the priority." The plan was set for 10 p.m., late enough that darkness would provide cover, early enough that late-night traffic wouldn't be suspicious. Sarah spent the intervening hours checking and rechecking her equipment, going over the transport route, identifying potential ambush points and alternate routes. Max could sense her tension and stayed close, offering the silent support that had carried them through so many difficult situations. At 9:30, Sarah arrived at the current safe house to find Maria packing a small bag while Emma slept in the bedroom. The woman looked exhausted, the stress of the past weeks evident in new lines around her eyes, and the way her hands trembled slightly as she folded clothes. "We're moving again?" Maria asked, her voice flat with resignation. "I know you're tired of running, but this is the last time, I promise. This new location is more secure. Once we get you there, you can rest, and Emma can have some stability until the trials are over." "And then what? We go back to hiding, looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives?" Sarah sat down beside her, choosing her words carefully. "The immigration hearing is scheduled for next month. Based on your cooperation and the Attorney General's recommendation, you're likely to be granted special visas. After that, we can help you relocate if you want. New city, new identity, a chance to start fresh where no one from the organization can find you. A witness protection program, like in the movies." Maria's laugh was bitter. "Except this isn't a movie. This is my life, Emma's life. We lose everything, our friends, our home, even our names, because I did the right thing. I know it's not fair. I know you shouldn't have to pay this price for someone else's crimes." Sarah put a hand on Maria's shoulder. "But you're alive. Emma's alive. And 63 women are free because of you. That has to count for something." Before Maria could respond, Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. "Transport's ready. We've got 2 unmarked vehicles, 4 armed officers, and an FBI chase car. The route is clear, and we're maintaining radio silence until we're outside city limits." Sarah woke Emma gently, the little girl blinking sleepily and clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Are we going on an adventure?" Emma asked, her child's ability to find excitement even in uncertain situations briefly lifting the heavy mood. "Something like that, sweetheart," Sarah said, smiling despite her tension. "Max is coming too. Would you like to ride with him?" Emma's face brightened. "Really? Can I?" They loaded into the vehicles with practiced efficiency, Emma and Maria in the back of Sarah's vehicle, Rodriguez driving the lead car with 2 officers, and the FBI chase car. Bringing up the rear, Max sat in his secured area, alert but calm, his presence somehow making the whole situation feel more manageable. The first 30 minutes of the drive were uneventful. They took surface streets out of Atlanta, avoiding highways where they'd be more exposed. Navigation through neighborhoods that were quiet at this late hour. Sarah kept checking her mirrors, watching for any sign of surveillance or pursuit, but saw nothing suspicious. They were just entering I-20 eastbound when Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "Possible tail, gray sedan, 2 cars back, been with us since Boulevard." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She checked her rearview mirror and spotted the vehicle Rodriguez had flagged. It was maintaining a careful distance, professional in its surveillance, which meant these weren't amateurs. "Copy that. What's our play?" "Stay the course for now. FBI chase car is going to drop back and intercept if they make a move." In the back seat, Maria had gone rigid, her arm wrapped protectively around Emma. "They found us. How did they find us? We don't know yet, but we're not going to let them get to you." Sarah's voice was calm, projecting a confidence she didn't entirely feel. She glanced at Max in the rearview mirror, and the dog's alert posture told her he sensed the tension. The grey sedan suddenly accelerated, pulling into the left lane and drawing level with Rodriguez's vehicle. Sarah saw the passenger window rolling down and knew what was coming a split second before it happened. "Gun! Evasive action!" The night exploded with gunfire. The grey sedan's passenger opened fire on Rodriguez's vehicle, bullets sparking off the armored panels. Rodriguez swerved hard, trying to force the attack vehicle off the road, while Sarah accelerated to get Maria and Emma away from the immediate threat. But the grey sedan wasn't alone. A second vehicle, a black SUV, appeared from an on-ramp ahead, cutting across lanes to block their path. Sarah had maybe 2 seconds to make a decision, and she chose the only option that gave them a chance. She cranked the wheel hard right, shooting down an exit ramp at high speed, tires screaming in protest. "All units, we are under attack. Multiple hostiles, firearms engaged. Officer in pursuit with principal witness, taking evasive route." Sarah's voice was steady despite the chaos, years of training overriding the adrenaline. Emma was crying now, and Maria held her daughter close, whispering reassurances in Spanish while her own face was pale with terror. Sarah navigated surface streets at dangerous speeds, the black SUV in pursuit, its driver clearly skilled and determined. "Max, ready!" Sarah commanded, and the dog's posture shifted, preparing for whatever might come next. They were in an industrial area now, warehouses and closed businesses, the streets empty at this time of night. Sarah saw an opportunity, a narrow alley between 2 buildings. The SUV was larger, less maneuverable. If she could get into that alley and out the other side, she might be able to lose them in the maze of industrial streets beyond. She took the turn at the last possible second, the vehicle barely fitting through the gap. Behind her she heard the SUV's brakes screeching as it tried to follow, but the driver couldn't make the angle. The SUV crashed into a dumpster with a metallic crunch, blocking the alley entrance. Sarah didn't slow down. She burst out the other side of the alley and immediately called for backup, rattling off her location while scanning for more pursuit vehicles. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, tight with pain but functional. 2 officers hit, non-life-threatening. Grey sedan is disabled. 3 suspects in custody. Collins, what's your status? I'm clear of immediate pursuit, but I've got a damaged tail vehicle blocking the original route. Proceeding to alternate destination via back roads. ETA 45 minutes. Copy that. FBI is coordinating with local sheriffs to secure your route. Stay off main roads. Lilas, the next 45 minutes were the longest of Sarah's life. Every car that appeared in her mirrors might be another attack. Every intersection was a potential ambush. She drove through back roads and rural routes, constantly varying her speed and direction, using every evasion technique she'd ever learned. Emma had cried herself into an exhausted sleep, still clutching her rabbit. Maria sat with her eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. And Max remained on alert, his senses extending beyond what human awareness could provide, ready to warn Sarah of any approaching threat. Finally, they turned onto an unmarked dirt road that wound through dense Georgia pine forest. 2 miles in, they reached a gate with armed guards, FBI agents who checked their credentials before waving them through to a compound that looked more like a fortress than a safe house. Special Agent Williams was waiting. "You made it. Rodriguez reported that you handled that ambush like a professional." Sarah climbed out of the vehicle, her legs shaky now that the adrenaline was fading. "How did they find us? How did they know the route? We're investigating. But Collins, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that the leak is coming from inside your department. Someone with access to operational details." The implication hung heavy in the air. Sarah thought about all the officers she worked with, people she trusted with her life. The idea that one of them could be compromised, could be selling information to traffickers, made her feel physically ill. Maria and Emma were escorted inside the facility, and Sarah made sure they were settled before returning to her vehicle. Max needed water and a brief rest, and Sarah needed a moment to process everything that had happened. Rodriguez called an hour later with updates. The suspects from the grey sedan were in custody and already lawyers up. The FBI was working on identifying them, but preliminary information suggested they were professional contractors, hired guns brought in specifically to eliminate Maria. "This is bigger than we thought, Sarah. We're not just dealing with a trafficking ring. We're dealing with an organization that has the resources to hire elite mercenaries, to infiltrate law enforcement, to orchestrate complex operations. The trials are going to be dangerous for everyone involved." Sarah looked through the vehicle window at the secure facility where Maria and Emma were finally, truly safe. "Then we make sure the trials end with convictions. We make sure these people go away for life, Because if we don't, if we let them intimidate us into backing down, then every victim we freed is still at risk. Every woman who testified is in danger. I know. Captain Morrison is bringing in the FBI's Internal Affairs Division to help root out the leak, and we're putting enhanced security on all witnesses, not just Maria. But Sarah, you need to be careful too. You've been the face of this investigation. If they're targeting witnesses, you're also a target. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to Max's head, drawing comfort from the dog's solid presence. I can handle myself, and anyone who comes after me has to go through Max first. That's not a fight they're going to win. She spent the night at the facility, sleeping in a chair in the common room, so she'd be close if Maria or Emma needed anything. Max slept at her feet, and even in rest, his ears would occasionally twitch, monitoring the environment for threats. Dawn came with news that felt like a turning point. The FBI's investigation had identified the leak. A records clerk in the department who'd been passing information to the organization for over a year. She'd been arrested in the night, and her communications had revealed not just the extent of the breach, but also additional evidence about the trafficking organization's operations. More importantly, Diego Ramirez had provided the final piece of the puzzle, the name of the person at the top of the organization, the one who'd been pulling the strings, while people like Kozlov and Chen handled the operational details. It was a name that sent shockwaves through Atlanta's law enforcement community. Lawrence Winters, a wealthy real estate developer with political connections and a reputation as one of the city's most generous philanthropists. He was hiding in plain sight, Rodriguez explained over the phone, using his legitimate businesses as cover for trafficking operations, his charitable foundation as a way to identify vulnerable women, his political contributions to ensure he had friends in positions of power. How do we get him? Carefully, very carefully. He's connected, powerful, and he's going to have the best legal defense money can buy. But Ramirez's testimony, combined with the financial records we seized and Maria's eyewitness account, gives us a solid case. The FBI is executing a warrant on his properties this morning. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. This was what justice looked like, not the quick, dramatic resolution of television shows, but the slow, methodical building of evidence until even the most powerful criminal couldn't escape accountability. The trial for Kozlov concluded 2 days later with a guilty verdict on all counts: human trafficking, racketeering, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. As the verdict was read, Sarah saw Kozlov's face remain impassive, but his hands clenched into fists on the defense table. He was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Marcus Chen's trial followed a week later. His cooperation had earned him a reduced sentence, 20 years instead of life, but he'd still spend most of his remaining years behind bars. And his testimony about Lawrence Winters ensured that the man at the top of the organization wouldn't escape justice. Winters's trial was scheduled for 3 months out, time needed to process the massive amount of evidence seized from his properties. But preliminary hearings had already denied bail, and the evidence presented was so overwhelming that even his expensive legal team was reportedly discussing plea negotiations. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, 6 weeks after the night of terror on I-20, Sarah stood in the backyard of the FBI facility, watching Emma play with Max. The little girl had recovered remarkably well, her resilience a testament to childhood's ability to heal. She was laughing as Max gently retrieved a tennis ball and brought it back to her, his tail wagging with obvious enjoyment of the game. Maria approached, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. She looked better, rested, the bruises long faded, her eyes holding hope instead of fear. "The immigration judge ruled yesterday," Maria said, sitting beside Sarah on a bench. "Emma and I are being granted special visas. We can stay." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "That's wonderful, Maria. That's the news I'd been hoping for." "They're still recommending we relocate, though. Start fresh somewhere where the organization can't find us. The FBI has a program. They can set us up in a new city with new identities. Where are you thinking? Maybe somewhere warm. California, perhaps, or Arizona. Somewhere Emma can go to school and just be a normal kid. Somewhere I can work an honest job without looking over my shoulder. Maria paused. Somewhere far from the memories of what happened here. Sarah understood. Atlanta would always be complicated for Maria, the place where terrible things had happened, but also where she'd found the courage to stand against evil. Sometimes the only way to truly heal was to start over. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. What you did, coming forward, testifying, risking everything to save those women, that took real courage. Maria's eyes filled with tears. I'm not brave. Brave would have been speaking up sooner before so many women suffered. You spoke up when it mattered most. You saved 63 lives, Maria. 63 women who are free now because you couldn't stay silent anymore. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to be proud of. Emma ran over, breathless and happy. Mama, can we bring Max with us to our new house? Please? Maria smiled sadly. Max has to stay with Officer Collins, mi amor. They're partners. But maybe in our new city we can get a dog of our own. Would you like that? Emma's face lit up. Really? A dog like Max? Maybe not quite like Max. He's special. But a good dog who can be your friend and keep us safe. Sarah felt a pang at the thought of saying goodbye to Emma and Maria. Over the past weeks, they'd become more than witnesses in her case. They'd become people she cared about, people whose safety and happiness mattered to her beyond just professional obligation. But she also knew that letting go was part of the job. She couldn't save everyone, couldn't maintain connection with every person whose life intersected with hers in the course of duty. All she could do was give them the best possible chance at a future, and then trust that they'd make the most of it. 3 months later, Sarah stood in a different courtroom for Lawrence Winter's sentencing. The trial had been a media circus, with reporters from national outlets covering every moment of the proceedings. The evidence had been overwhelming. Testimony from dozens of victims, financial records showing millions in illegal profits, communications coordinating the trafficking of over 200 women across multiple states over the course of a decade. The jury had returned guilty verdicts on every count. And now, Judge Thompson prepared to hand down the sentence. Mr. Winters, the judge began, her voice carrying the weight of moral authority, you used your wealth, your position, and your influence to orchestrate one of the most extensive human trafficking operations this state has ever seen. You preyed on vulnerable women, treating human beings as commodities to be bought and sold for profit. The suffering you caused is immeasurable. Winters stood impassively, his expensive suit and carefully groomed appearance now seeming grotesque rather than distinguished. His lawyers had tried every tactic, attacking the credibility of witnesses, challenging the legality of evidence seizure, claiming Winters had been unaware of his employees' illegal activities. None of it had worked. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, to be served in a federal correctional facility. Additionally, all of your assets are to be seized and liquidated, with the proceeds going to a victims' compensation fund. May you spend your remaining years contemplating the harm you've caused and the lives you've destroyed. The gavel came down with a finality that seemed to echo through the courtroom. Sarah felt Rodriguez's hand on her shoulder, a gesture of shared satisfaction at seeing justice done. In the gallery, she spotted several of the freed victims who'd come to witness this moment. Their faces showed a mix of emotions, relief, satisfaction, but also the lingering trauma that no verdict could fully erase. After the hearing, Sarah found herself surrounded by reporters asking for statements. She kept her comments brief and professional, deflecting credit to the task force and emphasizing the bravery of the victims who'd testified. But one reporter's question made her pause. Officer Collins, you've become the face of this investigation. What message do you hope this case sends? Sarah thought for a moment. aware that her answer would be quoted in dozens of news articles. I hope it sends the message that no one is above the law, that it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, how connected you are, or how powerful you think you are. If you commit crimes, if you hurt people, justice will find you. And I hope it sends a message to victims of trafficking everywhere. You are not alone. There are people who care, who will fight for you, who will stand beside you no matter how long it takes to bring your abusers to justice. The reporter followed up. What's next for you and Max? Sarah smiled, looking down at her partner who sat patiently beside her, unperturbed by the crowd and chaos. Back to regular patrol. There are always people who need help, always cases that need solving. Max and I will be out there doing our job, one day at a time. But regular patrol proved harder to return to than Sarah had anticipated. The trafficking case had changed something in her, had opened her eyes to crimes and suffering that existed in shadows most people never saw. She found herself noticing things she'd overlooked before. The woman at the bus stop, whose fear seemed disproportionate to the situation. The girl at the convenience store, whose bruises didn't match her explanation. The patterns of activity at certain businesses that suggested something darker beneath the surface. Rodriguez noticed her restlessness and approached her one afternoon as she was finishing paperwork in the bullpen. You're thinking about moving to major crimes, aren't you? Sarah looked up, surprised. How did you... Because I see that look in your eyes. The look of someone who's glimpsed the deeper darkness and can't unsee it. Rodriguez sat down across from her. The trafficking case was your first major investigation, but it doesn't have to be your last. Major crimes could use someone with your instincts and your determination. And Max, well, K9s are valuable in all kinds of investigations. I haven't made any decisions, but you're thinking about it, and you should. You're good at this, Collins. Really good. You have the right combination of intelligence, compassion, and courage that makes for an excellent investigator. The trafficking case proved that. Sarah considered his words. She'd always planned to stay in patrol, to be the kind of cop who was visible in the community, who kids could run to for help, the way Emma had run to her. But Rodriguez was right. The case had changed her perspective, had shown her that sometimes the best way to protect people was to go after the predators before they ever reached the streets. If I did transfer to major crimes, would you want to partner up? Officially, I mean? Rodriguez grinned. Are you kidding? You and Max would be the best partners I could ask for. Plus, I'm getting too old to chase down suspects on foot. Having a highly trained attack dog to do it for me sounds pretty appealing. They both laughed, and Sarah felt something settle in her chest, a decision clicking into place. Okay, I'll put in for the transfer. Let's see what happens. What happened was a whirlwind of changes over the next few months. Sarah's transfer to major crimes was approved. She and Rodriguez were officially partnered, forming a K9 investigative team that quickly earned a reputation for solving complex cases. Max proved just as effective in investigative work as he had been in patrol, his nose detecting evidence that human investigators missed, his presence calming traumatized victims while simultaneously intimidating suspects. They worked cases ranging from organized theft rings to assault to financial fraud. But Sarah found herself gravitating toward cases involving vulnerable victims, crimes against women, children, immigrants, anyone whose voice might not otherwise be heard. And in each case, she brought the same intensity and dedication that had driven her during the trafficking investigation. One afternoon, nearly a year after Emma had run to her crying for help, Sarah received an envelope in the mail at the precinct. No return address, but the postmark was from Phoenix, Arizona. Inside was a handwritten letter on flowered stationery, along with a photograph. The photo showed Maria and Emma in front of a modest house with a small yard. Both were smiling, genuinely happy. Emma had grown, her face fuller and healthier. Maria looked years younger, the stress and fear gone from her expression, and in the picture, sitting between them, was a golden retriever puppy with a red collar. The letter was short but full of warmth, Dear Officer Collins, we wanted you to know that we're doing well in our new home. Emma loves her school and has made many friends. I have a good job cleaning offices, and we feel safe for the first time in years. We named our new dog Hero because that's what you and Max were to us, heroes who saved our lives. We think of you often and hope you and Max are still out there, helping people who need you the way we needed you. Emma asks about you all the time and makes me tell her the story of the day she ran to the police officer with the special dog. Thank you, Officer Collins, for giving us our lives back. We will never forget you. With love and gratitude, Maria and Emma. Sarah read the letter 3 times, her vision blurring with tears by the end. She carefully tucked it into her desk drawer, next to her badge and her service commendations. It would stay there as a reminder of why she did this job, not for the headlines or the accolades, but for moments like this, for the knowledge that somewhere in Phoenix, a little girl was safe and happy and had a dog named Hero. Rodriguez found her at her desk a few minutes later and immediately noticed her emotional state. "You okay, Collins?" She showed him the photo and letter. Rodriguez read it, then smiled. "See? That's why we do what we do. That right there. I know. It's just, sometimes you wonder if it makes a difference, if what we do actually changes anything." It changed everything for them. It changed everything for the 63 women we freed. It changed everything for all the potential future victims who won't be trafficked because we took down that organization. Rodriguez handed the letter back. "You can't save everyone, Collins. But everyone you do save, it matters. It matters more than you'll ever know." That evening, as Sarah drove home with Max in the passenger seat, their shared ritual after particularly emotional days, she thought about the path that had brought her to this moment. From patrol officer to investigator, from responding to a child's cry for help to dismantling an international trafficking network, from wondering if she made a difference to knowing with absolute certainty that she did. The city lights of Atlanta sparkled in the darkness, millions of stories playing out in homes and streets and secret places most people never knew existed. Somewhere out there were people who needed help. Somewhere out there were victims waiting for someone to care enough to save them. Somewhere out there were criminals who thought they were untouchable, who believed their power and money made them immune to consequence. And somewhere out there, Sarah Collins and Max would find them, would stand between the innocent and the evil, would be the heroes that people like Emma and Maria needed them to be, because that was the job, that was the calling, that was what the badge meant, to protect and serve, to stand firm against the darkness, to be the ones who showed up when a frightened child ran through the streets crying for help. Sarah reached over and scratched Max's head, and the dog leaned into her touch, content and trusting. Partners, heroes, guardians. "Good boy, Max," Sarah whispered. "Let's go home." And together they drove into the night, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, ready to answer the next call for help, ready to prove once again that justice, though sometimes delayed, would always find its way to those who fought for it with courage and compassion. The story of Officer Sarah Collins and her faithful K9 partner Max was far from over. But this chapter, the chapter that began with a little girl's desperate cry and ended with freedom for dozens of victims, had reached its conclusion. A conclusion that proved what Sarah had always believed, that one person, with enough determination and the right partner by their side, could change the world, one rescue at a time, one victim at a time, one act of courage at a time. That was justice, that was heroism, that was what it meant to wear the badge and mean it. And Sarah Collins would keep wearing it, keep fighting, keep standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, for as long as she was able. Because that's what heroes did. They showed up. They did the work. They made the difference. Every single day.